Welcome to the Independent Characters, episode 202. This is Carl.
This is Adon.
This is Jody.
Thank you guys so much for joining me. Adon, thank you for flying out yet again.
Oh, no problem.
Man, are you dedicated?
Hey, I love it.
Independent character guy.
Love it.
This show is sponsored by Patreon member Michael Graylis. Thank you so much for your support. It has meant the world to us, and we are getting a lot of things accomplished with everybody's support. So thank you. I really appreciate it. Michael Graylis is the producer of the show. So what is this show? Well, we, a number of years ago, did an episode that was supposed to be about how to work with Forge World models. In that, we brought in Tim, who was
passionate,
a passionate guest about Forge World models, where the episode really went off the rails and kind of quickly got more and more extreme as to the you've maybe heard the heated sandbed joke that came from that episode. There just the lengths that he would go to build Forge World models were absolutely incredible, to the point where after that episode, Forge World reached out to me and said, "What the hell? All that is not needed." But that being said, my Thunderhawk that he assembled is probably the most sturdy model I have. Yeah. So he knows what he's doing. But we, as we kind of thought about this, we kind of thought about taking things to the next level. And one of the topics that we have always talked about here is narrative gaming. So we thought we'd do kind of a deep dive on narrative gaming, and then maybe see kind of how far our imagination could take a few ideas.
Pretty far, so turns out.
We go off the rails a little bit. But before we go into all of that, I think we should hit up Elite Choice. Jody, why don't you go first?
All right, best thing I saw in the community. Now I'm going to cheat a little bit because that's okay, the theme of that is the theme of Elite Choice, is whatever the vague, undetermined rules are, we don't follow them. And I'm cheating by calling out one of our very own as the best thing I saw in the community. Lars posted that
his ego is going to get so big now.
Oh man.
Well, he's not playing Necromunda, so it's not big enough. So
that's true.
All right. Loser. Anyway, truly, as I'm looking at a little sad face brain post for this post.
Anyway, go on with this post, because this is a really cool post.
This is great. Lars posted and shared that he's kind of learned through his daughter that he's probably been ADHD for his whole life and didn't know it. And he posted a video about how to deal with that, and specifically how to deal with that through the lens of a hobbyist. There was a link to a YouTube video of how to ADHD, and it was specifically focused. This video that he linked to was, do you have a wall of awful? This wall of negative vibes and things that hold you back. And it was a very thoughtful and heartfelt post about dealing with and struggling with ADD and ADHD and how to make that work for you. And I think that's something that's always been a background theme for the independent characters, is this notion of not just the hobby, but then the hobbies bleeding into real life and crossing over. To my own degree, I've felt, as I got older, I've kind of felt like this is more of a reality for me as well, that I have a hard time focusing, and there are certain things that I can't keep my attention on that I used to be able to. And all these little indicators.
Yeah, I thought one of the really cool things about this particular video on the wall of awful, it wasn't necessarily exclusively ADHD or ADD, but it also talked about what are your personal barriers to accomplish a goal.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's why I think there was a lot of resonance for gamers.
Right.
Yeah.
So is this just very thoughtful, being open? Lars, thank you for sharing. That does take some courage to share about your own real life struggles. And then also there's a lot of these things. A few episodes ago, we talked about the paradox of choice, and that the more choices you have, actually, the more difficult it is. And these different ideas, and thought it was, it just really was touched by it, both because I know Lars personally and know his kiddo, and then also because it's real life. And sometimes the hobby and the real life, they share some space together, and it's good to keep that in mind and be healthy.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah. Great call out. Adon, why don't you go next?
So Charlie Brassley posted a Primaris captain that he did.
Yeah,
and what he did is he basically kit bashed off of one of the ones that was already there, and it was like the bald pointy guy or the sword pointy guy, and he wanted to make something that was a little bit different. And so he posted a link to, he posted a picture of the captain, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
And when you look at it, you go, oh, it's an ultramarine, but they're not. It's his own chapter. the Cobalt Scions, and there's a link to his blog post where he writes this really long thing about not just how he did the conversion, but what's the story behind this captain, and then so what's the story behind this chapter, and how did they get to there, and why did they have a cobalt fist on their shoulder pad? And it was a really cool write up.
That's really keeping in with the theme of the.
It really is. It really is. And I was reading this in the context of the show and just thinking, man, you could create some really cool scenarios for this army to fight in. And so anyway. Good on you, Charlie.
Yeah, it's a beautiful looking model, too.
Yeah.
Set the bar pretty high for the challenge, which you'll hear more about in a minute.
Yeah, that is true. That's true. So I cheated because Jody keeps cheating, so now I'm cheating. I couldn't decide between two. I couldn't. Well, I had
then why are there 4 pictures there?
Well, because 3 of them are the same.
Okay.
The same aren't the same guys.
Yeah, okay, I know. I'm just
but it's Wilhan and his rusted Necrons with these power weapons, and the bases are just amazing on these guys as well, with the cracked earth and the barbed wire, and it's just wow! Like what a great looking Necron army.
And the concept of it.
I think one of my favorites is the Imperial armor Orpheus. I'm trying to remember the dynasty that those Necrons are, but they are rusted and all that, and I love that look, and man, did he really nail it. And I love the way he did the power weapons and the various electrical weapons that the Necrons have. They're just fantastic looking.
Yeah, they're Tesla weapons. It's
Tesla, that was it.
They're kind of like you can see like the wavy, instead of just the straight rods.
Yeah, he replaced them with wiring.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Awesome. That great use of complementary or contrasting colors with the orange and blue too. That's just really smart maximization of visual interest. Also, the blue is really lovely in that it helps break up the sameness of the rusted effect on their body and then the kind of warm tones of the base.
Right.
And then that blue really helps kind of refocus your eye and bring everything to life. It's pretty exceptional. And so often Necrons look a little one-dimensional, and these are really lively and vibrant.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, clearly understands color theory with this. The bases are beautiful too. Like,
it's great. Whole
thing is great. And then right after I had selected this, of course, Timothy Trentacost posts this. I think he's supposed to be a Black Templar, but it's a conversion from the Dorn 30K model. And good God, this model's beautiful.
Very nice.
The freehand and stuff on the blade, and just like everything.
Wait, that's freehand on the blade?
In the background.
Freehand, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yep, behind the
filigree,
okay, I see.
hazard striping.
Okay, yeah.
Just an incredible looking model, and I am just really, really blown away by the look of this thing. And so I had to pick 2. Hey,
it's your show. You do you.
That's right.
Live it.
Third, I have a Vindicator here. You know what?
But was that a thematic choice or a narrative choice?
So anyway, I think that's it for our elite choice. What a great couple weeks of work of people have been putting out there. Just
really
incredible.
good stuff.
I couldn't pick something pretty, so I picked something thoughtful because there's too many pretty models getting blown by these days.
I think there's nothing wrong with picking something that had an impact for you.
Oh, I think it's great.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm all for get your hobby however you need
it's not
it here.
Cheating.
No.
Yeah.
No, not at all. All right. Well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to kick off with a bit of hobby progress. So we will be right back.
Matt here to welcome you into 2020 and tell you about an amazing new offer from Table War. All returning customers receive an extra 10% off Table War's US web store. Need a tower case? 10% off. Need a new fat mat? 10% off. Need a macro mat, geomat, or just some accessories? All 10% off. This offer starts January 1st and will continue on throughout 2020. No coupon required. Just ensure you have an account and this discount is automatic. This is our way of saying thank you to all of our loyal customers. So visit us today at tablewar.com. Table War. Table War is a registered trademark of Table War Designs, Inc., all rights reserved.
All right, so let's kick it off with a little bit of hobby progress. You know what? I'll go first.
Okay.
I'll go first. I've now caught up to the challenge and successfully completed my 5 Terminators. Thanks for everybody's support in the Facebook group, because I got a lot of people really liking that
Pulling
post
for you.
and, and saying good job. And
It's not who finishes first or last. It's just about finishing.
there you go.
Good, because I finished last.
There you go. I am really
Did
happy.
you finish?
I will be finishing last.
That's right. And then we'll all
I
cheer
have
for
my
you then.
Terminators and they're posed and they're glued together and ready to go, but no, they're not done.
Let us know.
I will.
All right. Okay. So anyway, were you part of the challenge?
Yeah, I was.
Oh, were you?
Yeah, but I wasn't here when you guys.
So
Wrapped
what
it
you're
up.
saying is you had extra time to complete it.
Shut up.
No, I'm not going to.
Yes,
I'm just
you're
glad
right.
I'm not the last. Last.
Yeah. But did you have any doubt who was going to be last?
You know, I was rooting for you, Don. I was pulling for you.
We still are.
We still are. I'll never give up on a friend.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Okay. But you really should get it done.
I should, yeah.
Because we're gonna move on to the next challenge.
And they're for Adepticon too,
Jody's gonna tell. Well,
because they're going to be in the cracked mirror match.
yeah. Well, shattered mirror match is what's gonna happen if you don't get them done.
I know.
Don't look at him like why is he railing on me? That was the whole point.
That's
of
the whole
challenge.
point. That's right. It was your idea.
Hit him again, Jody.
No, it wasn't my idea.
It was mine.
Oh, it was yours. Okay.
Okay. Anyway, I got my 5 Terminators done. I am super happy with the way they came out. Like everything came together pretty much how I wanted it to. It is a scheme that I can replicate quickly. So I can paint up a lot of these guys like that. I want to thank Colin for helping me out with the transfer stuff. He had come over, almost a year ago now and put on transfers on his Custodes and showed me his steps. And fortunately, I took notes on all those steps, so I had them right there. I clarified a few things with him and then went to it. And I'm very, very happy with the way the transfers went onto these guys' shoulders.
And I like the you have different chapter loyalist helmets on their spikes.
Yeah,
like
pretty much Ultramarines and Blood Angels.
Yeah.
You know? So
I didn't even notice that.
yeah. I should have done a Salamanders one.
Yeah.
And a Grey
But then
Knight.
it would have looked too.
There's a Grey Knight
It
too.
would have looked too M&Ms that way.
That's true. That's true.
Dirty them down a little bit, and then they'll all look same dirt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So super happy with this and ready to move on to my first group of 10 just Chaos Space Marines. So,
I'll tell you what, I found painting the Chaos Space Marine models themselves, just the regular troopers, really enjoyable. I mean,
Yeah.
I know I went on and on about them, but the way they're sculpted and put together reminded me a lot actually of Orcs now, which is saying a lot considering how much I've talked trash about painting Space Marines.
Yeah.
But the Chaos Marines have just enough variation in the way their trim on their armor is, and the blades and the tabards and all those little
Right.
details keep it from feeling like I'm just painting another sphere and another cylinder over
Right.
and over.
Right.
I really enjoy them.
yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. I've already got the tabards like red. I've got the gold trim on. I've got the black done. So it's really just all the detail work that, that I'm hitting. So that should be fun. I also, again, went with the Wargamma bases, the same bases I used for my Thousand Suns stuff.
Right.
So I really like this particular base, which I think is their Mountain Pass, or I can't remember what it's
They look
called.
like slate.
They just look like slate,
Yep.
but works really well. I can paint them up super fast.
You don't have to
and
import the slate from England.
I don't have to import the slate from England. And
The ultimate posh designer.
do
Is that English slate?
you know how hard it is to find slate here in
Yes,
California?
I do.
Yeah.
It's a pain in the butt.
So like I went out to I don't know if I told you. I went out to England. Yeah. Dave Paints gave me a whole
He's a
bag.
listener.
Of it.
He knows.
I've gone through 3/4 of that bag at this point.
I
Next time I go, I'm going to pick up another bag.
Imported English slate.
Stuff's everywhere out there. Like resin models.
just check through the
I
garbage.
check all the garbage cans.
Wow, that's an old dusting off
Dustbins.
classic there.
Yeah.
Okay. Also bought a ton of Sisters of Battle stuff. So that's in my closet of opportunity over there. That
Did you buy the Triumph of St. Catherine?
yeah,
Cool.
yeah. That's a pretty amazing.
It's an
model.
amazing
You know what else I got? They had one left was Celestine and her two.
Oh, the Seraphim.
Because that thing is sold out on
Gemini.
GW site.
Oh,
Yeah.
is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least it was. I don't know if it is now, but
I see a lot of people running the list with Celestine without the Gemini,
oh
but it's
yeah, I guess
it's nice to have them as an option.
there's a few things that aren't out yet, right? Like
Yes, there are a
some
few
of the
things.
vehicles
Yeah.
I'm waiting on. So
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, again, that's another long-term project now that I am doing these, but those I'm I'm going to challenge myself again on those. Where I went black on these, I'm going to do their armor white with the robes purple. I really have a plan for how I'm going to approach the white, though, and I'm pretty confident in it. And honestly, doing the black has kind of increased my confidence level because I kind of psyched myself out over it. And now I feel very, very confident in just, I'm just going to
Brian would be
jump
very
in
happy
and get
with
going.
you. Just get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that'll be great. So yeah, once I get the Black Legion up and going as an army, and then I'll do a sister's army, and I'll build to a list and paint that list, and et cetera, and then add things here and there. So, and then I've also finished, and I think I mentioned before I'd finished the first one, but I finished book 2 and book 3 of the Siege of Terra series so far. There's going to be 8 books. Well, there's some novellas that they've added to it, which kind of irritates me a little bit. But that being said, I have finished Guy Haley's book and Gav Thorpe's book now, The First Wall. And First Wall.
First Wall.
I think that was the third one. Is that the third one?
I don't know. No, I don't think it's the second one. The First Wall is the one with the just crushing view of being
no, that's
conscripted.
That's Lost in the Damned.
Lost in the Damned.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That was a great book.
Man,
that was a great
book. What a
book.
crushing view of what it is to be an Imperial citizen thrust into the fight.
I think that may be Guy Haley's best book so far.
That's what you were saying.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it. And the climax of that book is just incredible.
Yeah.
The third book, Gav Thorpe. Gav, for me, lovely gentleman. He's hit or miss for me on books. Like sometimes I really like his stories, sometimes I don't. This is one that I really, really did enjoy. And I think I may have mentioned he does this interesting thing where I don't want to say Tarantino's it because it doesn't go backwards. But what he does is
flashback scenes.
No, they're not flashback scenes. He tells you at the beginning of the story kind of this pinnacle moment that starts, and then it cuts to the story, and the story progresses, and it'll be like 15 days until the assault on the wall, right? And then it'll go to another character, and it's like 2 days before the assault on the wall. And then it'll go back to these Imperial Guard kind of guys or conscripts, and it's like, 246 days until the assault on the wall. So like he kind of jumps back and he's telling you like as these people are getting closer, it's kind of interesting because you're like, kind of what happens when they get there a little bit, like the start of the climax, but what gets them there? It's a fascinating. It's actually a really good book. I really, really enjoyed it. Of the 3 so far, they're all good. I think I've enjoyed that one the least. It's tough. It's tough to pick. They're all real good. Yeah. These guys are hitting it at the top of their game in this series.
Yeah.
So that one is only available in the collector's edition, but should be out, I think, fairly soon for everybody else. But one of the things that frustrates me about these collector's editions, though, is reading a hardback book is a pain in the butt. in bed, it's like hard to read. Like I'd much rather read on Kindle.
But it's nice because you can put it in a slip cover and it stays nice.
They didn't come with slip covers.
Okay.
Nice try.
It's a loss.
Yeah, really. How come? Why didn't
I know.
they?
Yeah.
They are
they
beautiful.
should come out with one at the end that holds all of them.
I'd buy it.
Nice. I know. Yeah.
Anyway, that's me. And then I cleaned up my paint area after doing the Terminators to prep for what Jody had planned. So we'll get to that. Jody, what have you been working on?
It's been a really busy couple weeks for me, not in terms of hobby, unfortunately. So I did, in preparation for today, we just had a Necromunda kickoff for our Necromunda campaign, and I had to get my gang dialed in and ready to go.
Yeah.
The tables looked amazing.
Yeah, they were so...
It was fun.
Yeah, Bill really came through with helping us out on those tables. So I did get my gang to a playable place. They're not finished. I have bases to do still. I have them on just clean black bases.
And what gang are you playing?
I'm going to play a Chaos Cult.
Nice.
Yeah, staying true to form. And
tried to sacrifice Doug's guy today.
Oh, man, I was so close to the Dark Gods.
That
betrayed
warband
me.
can get really, really ugly really fast. In terms of the upgrades and the stuff they can take.
Oh, I thought you meant like just physically because
no. They can get really powerful.
Yeah, I look forward to finding out. As I think one of the least tuned in, like rules wise people here, I definitely am just kind of steering into the narrative of like, this feels right. This is what I'm doing.
You and me both. Like, I mean, I built my list for my Goliath guys based on, I like the idea of like the leader being this guy, and then him having 2 lieutenants. So I'll take 2 champions.
Yeah.
Like I have no idea what I'm doing, right?
Right.
And then I'm like, oh, they have these weapons. That looks cool.
That's kind of how I did mine too. I just kind of based it on what I had, and I really liked the look of them.
Right.
And then I turned out first games like, oh, I really need different weapons.
Yeah, that's the problem with me too. Fortunately, I have a couple other Goliath sprues sitting around. But.
Yeah, and I'm using the old Dark Vengeance Chaos Cultist models,
Perfect.
Oh, yeah.
which are great. But already today, I was like, I need to get some Helot Cultists, which are their gangers,
Right.
with double auto pistols, because that's really, really good.
Yes.
Good, nice.
And it's one of the few things they don't have a lot of war gear options, my guys. They're slumming it, but because they all have the gas masks and rebreathers, I was like, well, why do they all have those in the Underhive? And I was like, oh, well, because they all work on like a Promethium refinery or
Sure.
gas refinery. So they were a union group that
that's right.
fell to chaos and betrayed.
And they've got hand flamers and
I don't have access to those.
What did you
Oh.
name your gang?
The chamber, as in the gas chamber.
Oh, got it.
So
Oh,
they're
wow.
the chamber, and then the butcher and his boy. That just kind of came around because I converted up this cool guy with a giant chain glaive and was happy with how he
it
turned
looks
out.
really cool. I like that one.
Is good. And actually, it was funny. Matt came over and was like, "I think the little kid following him's around with the sunken head's a little too creepy." I was like, "That's the Zombie Smith staff logo or
Right, yeah.
the company logo. It's that
Yeah.
model they made." And I was
That's
like,
funny.
"Oh, I've had this guy forever. I've wanted to use him for
Oh,
something."
cool.
So he's the little Zombie Smith, which is a local company in our area.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got them up to a playable place. I look forward over the next week or so of getting them dialed in and getting their bases finished and doing the kind of fun color adjusting, fine tuning, especially on the butcher, the cult demagogue, the leader. He's like the least done. Again, everything didn't feel weird to play with it. It felt like, no, everything looks finished enough, but it isn't finished to where I want it to be. Prior to diving into them, actually did a little bit of a palette cleanser, which was started working on yet another Blitz Bowl team. And
How many do you have?
Geez, another one?
yeah, well, I want them all.
Okay, fair
so
enough.
I've got Chaos and Goblins left to do.
Wow.
So, and was started on my Chaos team. So, looking forward to them. Going to do I'm going to jump back about 5 years ago to Reddit and Instagram and do a galaxy pattern on their armor.
Oh, okay.
So they'll be very fair skinned and then have like this spiral galaxy effect that was on every kind of food and
Somebody
everything.
just posted it was
Right.
like in 1,000 Suns group, and they did this beautiful
Oh, I saw that.
art on Magnus's wings.
Yeah.
And did you see my comment where I said it looks really cool, but it also looks like he's a Transformers from a 70s van? And
Oh,
he's just
no.
It looked amazing.
Right.
It looked absolutely amazing. But I did go like, wow, it looks like that design should be on the side of a van.
That's exactly what I'll be going for because it feels
Perfect.
fitting for a Slaneshi Blitz Bowl team.
Oh, yeah.
But it also just worked on some D&D monster things. And I was taken back that like that's not very 40K, but also it was just where I was at that I needed to kind of to do the clean the mechanism. I didn't reset the paint station, but I needed to kind of clear off some items and then focus on just enjoying painting
Well,
some
this year
random
you're
one-off
about
thing.
finishing things off. So
Right.
Yeah.
So it was just, it's a model, a big cyclopean monstery thing that was sitting off on the corner. And it's been there for like half a year or so. And then in reading, I actually, because I had work travel this week and spent quite a few hours on the road, I finished Spears of the Emperor audio.
Oh, yeah.
Man, there's a lot to talk about on that one.
There is.
And
What
it's
did you
interesting.
general, like, what was your thinking on it?
Did you like it or not?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh.
Fair.
It was my first Aaron Dembski Bowden as well. And I know, Carl, you've said that's not your favorite of his
This
books.
book is not. Yeah. But it's good. It's good. It's just not my
It is good. It was interesting because Eric and Ian were out from the Midwest visiting and when we were just hanging out one evening when they came in, they asked me about like, oh, well, as an English teacher, what are your thoughts of reading like Warhammer fiction? I said, I really don't.
Yeah.
And there's some reasons for that. And it's not that I'm some super literary snob. It has a lot to do with my job is trying to convince people that there is quality and merit to literature.
Right.
And something can be entertaining and not necessarily be good.
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, yeah.
And I always,
I think the same is with movies.
yeah,
And
I
TV,
always
yeah.
point to, I call this the Twinkie example. I like Twinkies. I enjoy them. Are they good? No, they're terrible. They're gross in almost every conceivable way, but I really like them. I find them enjoyable. And I wouldn't say Spears of the Emperor is there by any stretch. It isn't that like it's terrible, but I like it. It's good. There's just, I have a lot of questions that this is probably not the time to really dive into them.
If
but
not now, when?
If not now, when we get Aaron Dembski-Bowden on to talk to him about it.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was fascinating. It was really enjoyable. It was far better than the vast majority of 40K fiction I have read.
The quality of writing, he writes things. It was funny because like he sent me something at one point and had me kind of read it and was like, what do you think about the direction of this? And I read it and there was like a saying in it. I can't remember what the saying was, and I wouldn't repeat it anyway.
Right.
But there was like this saying, and I'm like, did you pull that from somewhere, or did you just make that up? And he's like, I just made that up or whatever. Oh, you're deep, man. that was pretty cool.
I think the best thing I would say about it is it read like a novel. It didn't read like a comic book.
Yes.
And I find the vast majority
Yes.
of fiction from GW
It's comic book.
Reads like comic books.
It's much more like
and
a
that's not a
graphic novel.
judgment
Yeah.
by me at all.
And this is the comparison I make between like Codex stories and Forge World stories. Forge World stories feel like,
A history book.
or not even that, just like gritty
Yeah.
and deep and dark and ominous, whereas the Codex stuff feels more like a Marvel movie,
Right.
right?
And there were decisions I get.
And
again,
I like Marvel movies.
yeah,
you know.
they're good.
Yeah.
They're very entertaining. And there were times where I found myself really questioning why certain things were in the book or why certain things played out the way they did in terms of looking at the work as an entire piece.
Yeah.
And why are certain villains the way they are and certain heroes the way they are. And it just was interesting. I enjoyed it. I thought it was, your take, I know, had been like seeing the other side of the rift and how things are.
Yeah.
It's not good.
It's pretty messed up.
It's
Huh?
pretty bad.
Messed up, yeah.
Yeah, it was super enjoyable. I would definitely, I'm anxious
please.
to read something else of his.
Please, Talon of Horus.
Retell, of course. All right.
It is my favorite Aaron Dembski-Bowden book, and if you don't like it, well, first off, we can't be friends.
First of all, you're wrong. Yeah.
But no, but in all seriousness, like I really think you will see when you say like, why are the villains like this and why are they like that? Like he has a reason behind all those things, and you're like, oh, okay,
Right. He did do a nice job. I got to give him credit. He did a really nice job with the Space Marines.
Yep.
Which I find at best kind of stilted to read or to think about.
It can be hard,
Right.
And he did a pretty good job.
One of the first books I think he got a lot of credit for was Hell's Reach,
Right.
and he talked about, which has, in some cases the Black Templars and it has some Imperial Guard guys, and
Sisters of Battle.
he took a lot of thinking around how Space Marines would relate to humans, and he was like, they really can't. And so like I think he was looking at like autism and like those kinds of things where you're just communicating in a different way.
Right.
And it's really evident in the book. Like it's really fascinating.
Yeah.
I like that kind of exploration. It's not just like, and then he, blew more stuff up. And,
Yeah,
and there's some
like
of
an
that too. But
yeah, well, I mean, it's a 40K book, but if there wasn't, it would be really sad.
Well, because then you also get the view of the Princeps and the Titans and how they operate and how they communicate. And yeah.
So
Yeah,
anyway.
it was a fascinating look
Whoa.
into some of those. It was an interesting take on the Codex.
Yeah.
Codex
Codex
Imperialis.
Astartes.
Astartes, yeah.
Starties.
That it was an interesting take on that from a different lens. Yeah, it was well done.
Which is kind of nice because you're like, well, why would these chapters be different? Oh,
Right.
well, okay, they look at this very differently
Right.
than anybody else.
So that was me. It was a lot of work travel and a busy work schedule, and then a little bit of hobby, but kind of resetting back to self.
Okay, cool.
As always.
All right, Adon.
Yes. I missed last episode. Sorry.
That's all right.
But so in that time,
We'll forgive you for living
Yeah.
a state away and still
For
flying.
not getting on a plane.
Jeez Louise.
I assembled Necromunda Venator's gang, and I'm partway through the painting. They're not anywhere near done, but they have paint on them. Using the Z-axis bases.
Yeah, same
Fit on
ones
the-
I use.
on the table war tray.
Yeah,
They fit on the
they're
table war
great.
tray. Yeah, they're great. I like them. I did, I am pinning them to the to the bases, but it's I used the Forge World Venator models, a lot of them, but I'm not using their given names or whatever. I'm just using them as regular hunters, and then just using the gear that they have on them. And this goes back to what I was saying a minute ago, is that very few of them have long guns.
Right.
And in Necromunda, if you don't have long guns, you're doing it wrong.
You're Goliath.
And yeah, it's
No, you don't.
I
You
had
smoke
some
grenades.
yeah. So I didn't know about the smoke grenade thing. I should probably go back and look at that. But it's been fun because I'll talk about in games played. Worked on my Terminator squad. It's part of my cracked mirror match army for Adepticon, which is a really interesting. I talked about it before, but it's a really interesting setup, and so I'm working on that. I picked up the Triumph of St. Catherine as well, and the actual Miracle dice, which are really,
I didn't bother with those.
the dice are really neat. They're see-through,
Yeah.
right? They're hollow, and I would never use them as my regular dice, but I'm definitely going to use them as Miracle dice.
Oh yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
I gotcha. Yeah,
because
I'm kind of at the point, like I was talking about my eyesight and
Yeah.
painting and that kind of thing. I'm like, if those dice aren't easy to read, I don't
Yeah.
buy them.
No, absolutely, and I agree with you. I would prefer to have stuff that's like black with,
But
white
they will
tips or whatever.
stand out as those specific
Oh, yeah.
Miracle dice.
Yeah.
I got the Disciples as Inch dice for the exact same thing.
Yeah.
But because it's basically the same mechanic.
Right.
It's a little bit different, but pretty
Right.
close.
And then there was a thing on Etsy that I got because I don't have a 3D printer where it has a thing where you can put your Miracle dice and set it all up
Oh, cool.
and off to the side, so it's easy to see. And then the Triumph of St. Catherine, what a cool diorama model.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And my plan on that is to make them so you can put them on individual bases, so you can use them as a canoness. But also, one of the things that I remember reading from it is it's supposed to be a canoness from each of the different major orders. And when I see people paint them, they paint them all the same.
Yeah, I think even the
And you
example
shouldn't.
on the covers, they're painted all the
in
same.
my opinion. You should be painting them in the set colors of those basic. And they tell you which one's which. Like the woman in the woman in the front, she's from this order, and they basically tell you.
Interesting.
And so I think that's how I'm going to approach it. I don't know how often I would actually run it in a game. It seems difficult to use, but
We used it a little bit in playtesting.
yeah,
so
yeah.
it was pretty effective.
Yeah. Well, but you really have to move as one big bubble.
Yeah, which makes
It was
sense.
funny because we didn't know exactly how big the base was
we
supposed
knew
to be.
we weren't even really sure what it was going to look like. We just had the stats and stuff.
I got back the balance of my sisters from Painted Figs, and they did such a great job because I told them not to put them on bases, that I was going to be putting them on resin bases, because I bought a bunch of Dragon Forge design reliquary bases. And what they did instead is they cut off all the tabs and filed down the feet so they're all even and all that stuff. I didn't even ask them to do that.
So you can be ready to
So I can
put
be
them-
ready to
Oh,
just
that's nice. Yeah.
pin them on all of the bases. Really cool. And now I'm trying to figure out exactly how I want to. I have the first batch of my bases.
Yeah.
I'm trying to decide. I'm thinking maybe like Wraithbone and then either Sepia or Agrax and then overbrush them with Yostabi Bone.
What's the tone, the base, what bases are you using again?
There's the reliquary bases, so I want them to look like stone.
Oh, gotcha.
And so I was thinking like Wraithbone and then maybe Agrax and then dry brushing them with Ustabi Bone to kind of give that kind of, I don't know.
might work.
There's also a triad. There's a stone triad from Reaper Master Series. Dark stone, regular stone, and light stone.
Yeah, and they're probably
used those before.
more grays, right?
Yeah, they're a little grayer, yeah.
Adon, remind me of the color of your sisters.
They're silver with orange tabards, and it's silver and orange.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that would
probably
look really
gonna
good. I
wanna
had a
avoid
different
gray.
color tabard in my head.
So I'd
I had
probably
the
avoid
tabard.
gray because the silver is not really going to bounce off that.
No,
gray.
I think an orangey sandstone color will look
Yeah, that's what I was
fine because
thinking.
in my head they were red tabards, not
Well, they're on the red
Orange.
side of orange, but they're orange, yeah.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that'd look sharp. I think that'd look really
It's
good.
gonna look good.
Cool.
So, and then I have I did a Kickstarter from a place called Tinker House Games.
Yeah.
It's called Tinker Turf, like Tinker Toys, and it's all heavy cardstock terrain that you glue together, and you can make. It looks very much like the Zone Mortalis Mechanicus kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And
Well, it looks like it's taking a lot of effort to assemble.
but it doesn't take effort. It just takes time. And here's what kind of struck me when I did the Kickstarter. I bought 2 of the basic skirmish sets because I wanted to be able to really pack a 3x3 or 4x4 table.
Yeah.
And I finished doing one of the sets, and it took me 4 solid days of multiple hours per day
Again, a lot of
glue it
effort.
all. And so using binder clips and these other
Yeah, I saw.
clamps and a lot of white glue, I kind of got into a rhythm on doing it. But here's what's kind of strange. I really enjoyed it.
That's good.
I don't like assembling regular models very much, as we all know. I'm not a super intense painter. I'm the only guy in the room that Duncan can't praise in one of his classes. But this stuff, maybe it's because when you finish gluing it, it looks complete. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but
it works for you.
I got into a groove and I looked up and I'd been doing it for 2.5 hours. I was like,
cool.
Oh, this is really cool. So yeah, I don't know what it is about it, but
I overheard something, Doug. You and Doug were talking about this a little bit, and he made a great point about, if you're going to go with all Games Workshop terrain,
right,
go with all Games Workshop terrain. If you're going to go with all MDF terrain, go with all MDF terrain. If you're going to go with all these kind of hardboard terrains that are pre-printed, cardstock, do that. And I thought that was a really, really good point, that they don't mix very well.
No.
Right.
But if you really kind of go all in on one, they all look fantastic.
Yeah.
Every single one of them looks great.
I gotta tell you, I hate working with that wood, the
MDF
stuff. I absolutely hate it.
Yeah, depending on how they go together, there's a couple of brands that I've had where
I don't like painting it. I don't like dealing with
it's its own
absorption.
animal.
Yeah, it's totally I think some of it, like Brian Harvey has painted up that Eldar table of that stuff, and his looks fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I think that was kind of the point, is any of them can look really nice, but Adon, you really like this cardstock stuff, and that's awesome.
It'll look great.
And it'll look great.
Yeah.
And, and if you like building the GW stuff, it looks great.
Oh, the GW stuff is beautiful. And I would love to have, I'd love to have the money to buy as much of the GW stuff as this, because this stuff wasn't that expensive either, which was kind of nice.
The GW stuff's pricey.
And the nice thing about it is it packs down pretty tight. And one of my original plans was I was going to send it to my son in Pittsburgh, who's playing Town now, so that he could have some stuff to play on. But I might keep it.
Make him get his own.
But I have another set of it. So
one of the really nice things about the pre-printed terrain, though, is that all your interiors are just as as well designed as your exteriors, and your color palette's a little bit different. And I mean, I think there's a lot of upsides to all of them. That's awesome, man. That's really cool.
For sure. I think it's great.
So that's cool. That's kind of what I've been doing.
All right, well, let's talk games played.
Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing.
Okay.
Just finished The Crimson King.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm into Celestine by Andy Clark. Crimson King, you've read it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, interesting.
No, I too found it a struggle to get through. Because I think that was what I heard you say before.
It's the loudest thing he's ever heard. It was a sound that he's never been able to endure before, and then it happens again 5 pages later. The light
even
was
worse.
more intense than anything he'd seen. But it's like, okay, we got it. It was intense.
We're at 11 all the time.
All right.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I could.
But I liked the story arc was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's just some of the hyperbolic.
Sometimes
prose.
it can get a little too much.
Yeah.
That's all right. Let's talk games played, because today.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to interrupt me again. What's up, Jody?
Well, I'm just going to follow the show notes.
Let's follow the show notes. The challenge.
Yeah.
So Jody, you were going to pick this time.
I am.
What's going on for the challenge?
All right. So our challenge, and for those who don't recall, the challenge is a challenge of hobby prowess that every 2 weeks we will try and sit back down with some sort of challenge that we have finished off. Our first go round was after episode 200. We all decided to paint up a 5-man Terminator squad, and we all succeeded at various levels of attempting that.
Did we?
At attempting it. We all successfully attempted it.
Yeah.
All right. So the challenge we are...
Seriously? I failed.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I failed.
Hey, mine didn't...
Look, if you took that personally, Adon.
Yeah,
that's on you, man.
I thought we all made it an effort. And that's the idea, right? The idea is that we all are trying to make progress.
Yeah.
So I'm going to change it up this time, though. So it's not per se a painting challenge. Now, if you want the extra bonus point, you could do the painting. Mm-hmm. But we're going to show up in 2 weeks, hopefully with a unique model of our own crafting and design. We're going to convert a model.
Okay.
It could be a squad. If you want to convert a whole squad and go that route, go nuts. If you want to, but it's about conversion. We're going to do a conversion, and we're going to show up.
You want to channel your Wade Price, Darren Latham, Owen Patton part of your mind and
hack
kit bash something together.
Yep. So my inspiration for this is one of our local Santa Cruz friends, who is very deep into the old Hammer, had a couple of the old Warhammer Fantasy Battle. I believe the model's named Nazdrag. I don't think that's right now that I'm saying it. It's a fantasy wizard, an old fantasy wizard orc that's like hunched down with a carved staff.
I know who you're talking about.
And a big
and a
cloak.
hood.
Yeah.
He was one of the very first models to go when Games Workshop was doing the Citadel Hall of Fame. It was one of the very first models to get inducted into that group. And I need a new Weird Boy. The Weird Boy I designed for my army, I love, but he's so fragile. He's literally floating up in the air, and it's a grot with a chain is like holding him down.
Okay.
And it's the little piece of chain that holds him up. There's a wire I drilled all the way through. So he's wire from top to bottom, but it's a little wire has this orc floating, and it makes me nervous.
So you want to replace him?
So I need to replace him.
You know
So
what?
I'm
I think
convert
that's fine to be selfish in the challenge when you pick like what.
Oh,
it is
absolutely, you
You
should.
want. Yeah. So I think that's a legit thing. I got an idea already.
Cool.
Yeah,
floating
I
around.
mean, this is a perfect time to do it because we're all playing Necromunda.
Right.
So,
Totally appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not doing Necromunda.
You don't have to.
I'm gonna do something towards my Black
Convert
Legion.
something.
I just want to get this going.
Yeah. So convert
I got an
something,
idea.
show up with a conversion. If it's just converted, that gets you in the door. If it's painted, well, that's pretty cool too, but that's not what it's about. It's about making something unique for your army.
I like
so listeners, get on it. See you in
let's
2
see
weeks.
your conversions. I like that.
Cool.
That. All right. So now let's talk games played.
Well,
Can I do that?
yes.
Okay. Because today we kicked off our Necromunda campaign, which Josh thankfully has taken over being the there's a
Arbitrator.
term, arbitrator so he's handling all the administration.
The puppet
pieces.
or the mouthpiece of Helmar,
He's doing great.
the shell, whatever.
So anyway,
Down with
he is
me.
the arbitrator. He took it over from Doug, who was about to have a seizure because he was losing his mind over it. We had something like 16 people interested, and we knew that wasn't going to be realistic. And we got down today to, I think we had 8 people.
It was amazing when I walked in. I was like, wow, there's a lot of people in here. You
Oh,
guys
yeah,
had
yeah.
a lot of really cool looking tables running.
Yeah. So these were the only games I got in over this 2-week period.
Same.
So I got 2 Necromunda games in today. I got Game versus Matt, which was a blast, and he was playing Gene Stealer Cult. I am playing Goliath, and he rolled very poorly. I rolled very well.
It's funny how that shakes things out.
In Necromunda, that can be super huge. Too.
Super good. Also, my smoke grenades were very, very handy. Getting better with kind of where I place them and using those. I've got even some new ideas there. So I ended up winning that match against Matt. But man, what a thematic, like fun fight it was. Matt, this is how badly Matt started off.
Oh.
You had a cache, right?
A loot crate.
A loot crate.
Yeah.
One in his area, one in my area. It offered you benefits if you were near it, but you could like loot it. He opens his and it was booby trapped. Like he rolled a 1, it's booby trapped. Blew 2 of his guys off their feet right away. One gets injured, the other one doesn't, but then has to stand back up that round. I mean, it's just like, and everything cascaded down from there for Matt. Like,
And then his second game, he repeated the feat.
did the same thing.
2 games in a row.
Oh,
Bang.
no.
When are you going to learn not to open those things?
Yeah,
I know.
Press the big red
Either
button.
that or make sure you have a better thief.
Right. Exactly.
Up the
Where's your
intelligence
rogue?
on somebody.
And then I got to play against Bill, which Bill's probably one of the more experienced players in the group. So that was fun because he kept catching me like, hey, don't forget to roll this. Don't forget. Oh, thanks. You know,
He's
so.
actually really nice to play
Oh, he's
against.
great.
And Horus Heresy as well, since I don't play it. But when we used to play, he does that. He likes to say, hey, don't remember you had these other options as well.
Yeah, yeah. So
very nice.
I played, and he's playing Goliath as well. And so it's a Goliath on Goliath game. Very different units in the army, though, or in the gang. And he had not seen the use of smoke grenades before and was like, I need to look into this because, I'm just tossing them out there in front of me and running my guys forward into it, and he can't shoot at them. And so that was pretty handy. Unfortunately, I ended up towards the end of the game getting a little eager and got a little too aggressive and then ended up bottling out. So
Royd raged out.
yep.
What did you notice between how you built a gang and how he built a gang?
So he has some Juves in his gang,
Uh-huh.
and I am just 7 models. I am a gang leader, 2 champions, and then 4 gangers.
Okay.
He had 8 or 9 models on the table to my 7. because he has a few Juves in there.
So it's the quantity is its own quality kind
It,
of thing.
well, and it is because you get to activate,
Right, more guys.
more at the end
Yeah.
there. And but toughness 4 is actually not a joke in Necromunda. Like it offers some benefits, some significant benefits there. I think I made maybe 1 armor save the whole time, maybe 2. But you're not supposed to really have much in the way of armor saves.
Right.
So.
It'd be
So
nice
he
to have
did a
armor.
good job of continually knocking my guys down, which would slow them because I needed to
Right.
get into close combat. And that was where I kind of, at one point, I was just like, forget this. I'm just charging. And then, oh, no.
Nope.
One round too early. If I'd held off again and just kind of played it careful, I think I would have been good. But I got a little too eager at the end there. But I absolutely had a great time. Bill brought some amazing terrain.
Yeah.
I've collected all the Zone Mortalis stuff from Brian now, who I commissioned to paint all my Zone Mortalis stuff. So I have 4x8 board of Zone Mortalis stuff at this point. It was fun. Man, it was fun. That game plays fun.
Yeah, it is good.
And it plays quick. Once you have the rules down, like it plays pretty quick. There's a lot of fiddly things to it.
Right.
But
And the pre-game and post-game stuff, if you're not used to doing that kind of stuff, is more involved than what people are normally used to doing.
And
Yeah,
so
for
Josh has us using Yak Tribe, which I had never heard of before. And it's yaktribe.game, I think.
Games, yeah.
And boy, is that a great tool.
Yes.
Boy, is that a great tool.
Yeah.
And you can just print out your cards and just go. So every upgrade, between rounds, I would just update my guys, print out a new set of cards and play. Super fun. Had a great time. What about you, Jody?
I got to play Doug 2 times in a row, which was great.
Oh, yeah,
because in our first game, we played a Zone Mortalis style board, Underhive board.
Right.
And it was a tunnel fight. And there was a bottleneck. And my Chaos Cult we got bodies. We don't have much in the way of gear. And our guys are all very, very average. Nobody has any armor.
Yeah.
It's not even an option. Every time you're like, smoke grenades. I'm like, yeah, that would be cool if I could buy them, which I can't. They're not on my list. So, but it was a bottleneck. And he came running in with his Cawdor gang and he went for it, and I sent one of my infiltrators to kind of distract him.
Yeah.
And his first activation was to chase after that guy. And he'd forgotten that he was going to send rat bombs into this room that my guys were in, which would have caused absolute havoc.
Yeah.
Rat bombs, yeah.
Oh.
And instead I opened up with my opening.
What are rat bombs?
What are rat bombs?
Yeah.
It literally, they strap bombs on rats and then release them running into the room.
Oh, I thought you were saying rad bomb.
No, rat,
you were
rat,
actually
like
saying
squeak,
rat
squeak.
bomb.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Where's the cheese?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and they've got little models, and then they start randomly moving, and if
that's
you, and if
fantastic.
you
They
blow
actually
them
have
up, they're
models for that?
incendiary bombs. Yeah, they're
wow.
incendiary charges if you kill them, and yeah, it's amazing. But I shot the guy who had them with him, and he never got off the ground until it was too
awesome.
late, and so it went really poorly. Of basically, he was running into this bottleneck that I had surrounded in auto guns, and just lit up the hallway.
Every
slowly
time
worked through.
I have played Necromunda, like I've enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But every time I've played up until this point, I've never played in a campaign before. And so I was very excited to see like how the territories were working and we were
Right.
progressing. And I'm like, oh, this is where the real, and I knew everybody always says this is where like the real Necromunda strength comes in. And I can see it. It's fun. It's really fun.
So,
As long as you didn't roll in the 60s on the After Effects.
oh, we did have some people die today.
I killed. Okay, so I lost that game against. Yeah, I'm playing the long game. That's what I want to say. I lost that game against Bill, but he had a guy seriously wounded at the end of the game, and he rolled a 66 for his wound thing. So that guy was dead, and it was one of his champions too. So I was like, he's like, oh, how much does this guy cost? And I'm like, a lot.
So one of the choice bits was in defeating Doug's gang. At the end, you roll to see if you capture somebody because they eventually had to pull out. And I did. And if you're a chaos cult, this is the bee's knees.
Yeah.
Because if they can't save the guy, you can sacrifice them to the dark gods.
Right.
Which is
And what does that do for you?
I don't know.
It
just
sounds
gonna be
good.
Awesome. It provides you a huge benefit in your next game. Your next game, depending on which god you beseech, because you have to pick a god to beseech with a sacrifice. Now, you can sacrifice your own dudes.
Blessing of Tzeentch, there's no modifiers to your shooting.
Right. And then you can re-roll your recovery rolls if you're beseech Nurgle.
Right.
And you can re-roll a hit roll, I believe, if it's Khorne. And then you can...
They're pretty thematic.
Yeah, they're very thematic. You can do something extra with charging. if you beseech Slaanesh. I managed to capture his leader of all people, and he was pretty beat up. So the second game we played was him trying to recover his leader and get him back. And man, apparently random isn't random, because when you have guys on guard duty, it's this very random rolling mechanic. Yeah. And I rolled so badly for so long. It was the first 2 turns of the game, and I hadn't moved one of my own models yet. And like my reserves, and then I do finally move one, and they spring the alarm.
And what's going on is he's trying to sneak in to save
his guy.
Okay.
So I finally spring the alarm, and then the rest of my gang comes running, and I botch all those rolls. So they come in on the total opposite end of the board.
Because your opponent gets to decide where they come in.
And this is after like half of my sentries have just wandered off into the dark, and, staggering off into the night.
So the rules for this in the rescue mode is very similar to the
old
kill team
Yeah.
in 4th edition. Yeah. With the sentries.
But I mean, just an absolute hoot, a great time.
Which is, by the way, I think where they got it originally. They got it from Necromunda.
Yeah, this reminds me of, this was probably the thing that felt the most 90s Necromunda to me.
Yeah, I could see that.
Man, the dude falling 2 levels also.
Oh, that's right. One of my guys got
1 level and fell to the next.
That guy, thankfully, was toughness 4. He had upgraded in the first game and gained a point of toughness. So when he went bouncing Homer Simpson into the Springfield Ravine style down the side of a building, one ledge to the next ledge, I managed to fail all those initiative tests that would have kept him up on a higher ledge as well. So needless to say, that consistently not getting things done resulted in his stupid leader got away, and I didn't get to sacrifice him.
And the other thing I'd say is, next time you take prisoners, don't put their weapons with them in this.
Especially when the guy's got a freaking flamer.
You have no choice in this.
Flamethrower out of.
To be fair, you have no choice in this. Like, once he can escape, he's got his weapons. But I just found that funny. I'm like, who would store the weapons right there?
Oh, look, I'm free. Oh, you're all surrounding me, and I have a flamer. I did play one other game, though, that was not Necromunda related, lest we turn into the Necromunda Badcast. Nope. So the kill team rogue trader with the Lucidian Star Striders spaceship thing.
Yeah.
Matt and I played that with the Star Striders.
I saw you had played that. I was curious.
On the board. I actually played this quite a while back, and I realized I'd never talked about it on the show. What a fun and interesting way to play Rogue Trader. Kill Team.
Kill Team, yeah.
Yeah, it's noticeably different because you're opening and closing doors. Right. We modified it to where instead of the Gellerpox infected, they were fighting against just a Gene Stealer infestation.
Oh, nice.
Which worked, I mean, wholly thematic.
Yeah.
That works.
Yeah.
It was super fun. It worked. I was shocked because I was like, man, once the Gene Stealers get through the doors, they're just going to gut them. But because of the way Kill Team works with timing and spacing and gunning people, it worked great. His assassin seemed like a stud because she was going toe-to-toe with Gene Stealers and blocking up corridors. And it was super, super enjoyable. And it really had that like claustrophobic, packed in a ship feel.
Well, I think that the rules for Arena are similar to that as well.
I haven't played that one, so
yeah,
I have it up there. I've read through.
It's the one that they designed for competition.
Tournament play.
Yeah. And it is, the old Tempest in a Teapot situation. It is very tightly packed and very frenetic. And so another way to enjoy Kill Team that I'd recommend people give a try. It was
cool,
very fun, and it actually made the Star Striders not feel like a embarrassing footnote, which is kind of what they feel like when they get involved in 40K games. They're bad.
Don, how about you?
I played Necromunda.
Yep.
Alex Willoughby is running campaign at
spoiler
Baxter's.
alert. Next episode is all about Necromunda campaigns.
Is that right?
Yeah, we're talking the different type of Necromunda campaigns and how they differ.
Okay.
So and then we're moving away from Necromunda.
Okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we'll talk about it because we're playing the campaign, but
it seems like once a podcast starts talking about
that's
Necromunda,
all they talk about.
They have a really hard time moving.
I don't
want
to fall into that trap.
It's kind of a bad way to cast, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems like a bad way to.
So
that was good.
I'm using the Venator models, as I said before, from Forge World, but I'm not using their Dramatis Personae cards.
Yeah.
I'm just using book stats for Venators. And it's kind of interesting because with Hunters, you can pick for your just, your bog standard Hunters, you can pick from different, like 3 different profile lines. Like either they can shoot better, but they're tougher, or they fight better, but they're slower, things like that. There's trade-offs. And so I picked some stuff, and I had the Slate model, the dude with big power hammer. He comes with a Cyber Hound, but I don't have the points for that yet. But I just was using regular points. Well, one of the things those models don't have, as I was saying before, is long guns. there's only a couple of guys who have long guns, and so I was able to find an extra autocannon bit from somewhere, and so I kind of glue that to somebody's back so he has a gun. But I had the first time I played against this guy named Kyle, who's really, really good at the game, super smart dude, but he's also one of those guys who kind of helps you learn how to play, and my leader, I'm using the Cal Jericho model for my leader.
Yeah.
And he just charged in and just smashed his leader in the face. And his leader is this really like buffed out chaos. He's using the chaos guys, buffed out chaos guy. And he's like, I don't know if that's such a good idea. And then I just rolled like a champ.
There you go.
Killed his dude. And he was like, okay, did not expect that. He won that game anyway, but it was, it was one of those things where like,
That's a good heroic moment.
yeah, it was cool. And then we did, last week we did I played some other games, but then the other one I wanted to talk about was the amble hunt.
Yeah.
We did for downtime, we did the amble hunt. And one of the things that you should add to your team as soon as you can is an ambot.
Okay.
Those things are ridiculous.
But you have to hire, you don't get to keep
It's a hired,
it, right?
it's a hired gun. Oh my gosh. But the amble hunt was pretty fun. And I ran in the actual amble ended up being on the opposite side of the board from where I was at. We were playing 4 people on a kind of a Zone Mortalis style board.
Yeah.
And one of the other spawns or whatever it was on my side, and I grabbed him and ran. And I was like, I do not want to get involved in a protracted fight against these overly buffed chaos guys were on my side. And then to my left, the other corner was a bunch of Goliaths with guys with flaming chain glaives and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going that way either. Luckily, the Goliath guy was really into wanting to kill the amble. So I was able to stay away from him. So I played a very defensive game, got out of there. But I was able to get a bunch of, it was fun. The amble hunt was fun to see how that whole mechanic works. They kind of use the thing with the blips that move around Yeah. So that was kind of cool. Also played some Warcry and Underworlds and other things, but that's not 40K.
That is not. Yeah, and they did Necromunda just released these Goliath things. Bill was showing me, and they have a Goliath Berserker.
Oh, right? Yeah.
So that guy looks
That's a
pretty good.
huge shift for Necromunda that we're getting these codex style books,
Yeah.
these new house exclusive.
House of Chains is coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I guess I lucked out and picked the right army.
That guy, he looks kind of like some of the renditions of Bane.
Kind of.
I thought Jekyll and Hyde, but same.
People
same sort of
are
vibe.
saying they don't like his face. I think it's appropriate to the model.
To the model.
Yeah.
It's goofy looking, but I think it's intentional, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's neat to see this new kind of step in the specialist game direction. That
Wow, they're really embracing
One could
it.
argue.
And then I need to also get a Goliath Sump Croc, which I had not heard of before. And then I watched the Twitch feed for GW, and they were playing. They had one, and I was like, "What is that?" And I was like,
a Sump
"I gotta
Croc.
get a Sump Croc."
Sump Croc. Yeah.
He's awesome looking.
Don, what were you saying?
No, I was just going to say one could argue that having people having to buy a quote unquote codex for a game that hasn't really required them before, it seems a bit much. I don't know. I kind of like the fact that if you have the books for the game, you have all the gang stats in there.
I agree.
I
think
agree, but I'd like to see the game grow too.
I would too, and I think
Sump Croc is so cool.
if you can't tell, Carl's looking at his screen at a picture of a Sump Croc.
It has 4 eyes.
I think for specialist games, I said this a while back, and I'm increasingly holding to it. And even I'm having a hard time, Adon, with this one of, I bought the Book of Ruin, and I was like, well, do I need to buy all the other books so I can play? And the answer is no, I don't need to buy all the other books, but I do need the gang book, and I do need the core rule book. And if I'm going to play a Chaos Cult, I need the Book of Ruin.
Do you need the gang book if you're playing the Chaos Cult?
It has all the gun stats in it.
Yeah.
They're
all
not
the
in
weapon.
the Cult of Ruin?
They're not in the core book. Our group is geographically a little bit spread out. I mean, not bad by any reasonable stretch, but I mean, it is an hour drive for Matt and Josh and I to get here, give or take. And Josh and I just almost live perfectly the wrong direction away from each other in Santa Cruz, where it's it's almost 40 minutes for us to get to each other.
Yeah.
So having us all spread out, there is I want the books, but there was that element of man, that's almost $200 in books.
Yeah.
And we're not talking models or anything. And then I hear what you're saying. Then now to want a codex on top of that.
Yeah.
In a weird way, I'm kind of justifying that because I feel like I want the Gang War book.
Yeah.
That I'm like, well, maybe I do want to play an Escher Gang to justify having that book.
It does bother me. It does bother me that if like the cult, like the Chaos Cult is in the Cult of Ruin thing, it does bother me that all you need are the weapon stats. And that's all you need this other book for. Like that's a little
right. And that's
tough
where
to
I
swallow.
became frustrated. I was like, why are the rules I need for my gang
they should
not
be
in my
inclusive
gang
in your gang
book?
Yeah.
Right.
And they're not. I mean,
That's
they're just
a fair.
not.
That's a
Well,
fair
same thing
point.
with the Venators. The Venators are in the Book of Peril, but there's stuff you need from the other books.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a fair amount of that. I mean, the reality is if we're going to be critical, and I don't want to go too far down the necromancy.
Actually,
no.
I won't.
Realistically, using the what was the site?
Yak
The
Tribes
Yak
Games.
Tribe site. Like all your stats are pretty much there.
It doesn't have the weapon descriptors.
Doesn't have the weapon
Weapons,
descriptors,
right.
which you can't ignore.
No, you can't ignore it. But I know what my weapons do now. Like
Right.
once I've played,
Yeah.
I have a bunch of flame weapons, and I guarantee you I'm going to need to look up
what
how
Blaze
Blaze
does?
how Blaze
Blaze.
works for getting
Run 2d6 inches
not
in a
being
random
on fire,
direction.
and then when you are on fire, and how far do you move, and when do
Yeah.
you roll for? I mean, there's a lot of steps to
Okay,
it. So
all right. maybe
you know,
my knockdown isn't as
Oh my gosh.
complicated.
no,
I've had models catch fire, and they
All
go
right,
running
no.
around in a random direction and got to roll around on the ground.
Yeah.
I
well-
think Doug and I had 6 different people on fire in
Oh
our first
my
game
gosh.
because,
Well, I hear what you're saying.
So
I
it-
agree with you. I think those rules should have been included in the.
but the big old butt I got at the end of this on the backside of
You
all
do
this
have a big old
ranting,
butt.
it's nice of you to notice, is that these are specialist games.
Yeah.
And the specialist game range are boutique games.
Yes.
And if you're wanting to play these games, there's a certain amount of in for a penny, in for a pound. If you want to play Adeptus Titanicus,
Yeah.
you can buy the box and just play it. You can buy Necromunda and just play it.
That is true.
But if
Right.
you really want to have the full specialist game experience, you are going to have to pay a premium price, even beyond what is already a very luxury price sort of situation.
let me ask you this: have those weapon, not necessarily the stats, maybe, but the descriptors? I wonder how much they have changed from the original books.
A lot of them aren't even in there.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Darn, because I could give you the original book.
I have them.
Oh, darn.
Yeah, and that's why I know that, like, no, I really have to go buy
That's
these
really
other books.
disappointing. Ah, well.
And
Go buy
I
them.
was like, oh, well, I'll buy the box set, and like I'll get an Underhive box or I'll get a this box. And I
Right.
was like, no, you really want the proper rule book. Like
Yeah.
even buying
Right.
those, you're missing out on
Well, and
rules.
to your point is once you have that book, then you're like, well, I might as well make a Venator game.
Well, right. That's kind of how they grab you, right?
Yeah.
you know, and there's
But
a part
I
of this.
do agree. I think the weapon descriptions and stuff should almost be an auto include in every
Yeah.
gang book.
Right.
Right.
And it's not that many pages. And
No, it should be.
there's a fair amount of stuff when it comes
fair.
to the Necronoid. But I say this of all the specialist games, and I think that's kind of the point I'm trying to make here is, the specialist games are special, and
Yep.
you're gonna have to be willing to chase things and stay up to date, and a little bit more than even with 40K.
Yeah.
Yes.
Prime, that the other one moves at a different pace. So
That is true.
something to be mindful of. But doggone it, it's fun.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, we were just kind of like 3 or 4 of us have the gang book here, and we were just sharing it around as people needed it,
Right.
that kind of thing. But
But if you're playing, you need it.
Yeah. If you're playing
I feel like
In time, maybe not.
because questions come up, and even for the first 4 or 5 games, there was stuff that I was having to look up a lot.
yeah, I'm not saying you don't, but I'm saying the more familiar, it's the 80-20 rule. Like the more
Right.
familiar I became with my gang, like the less I was looking stuff up for
Sure.
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 And I'd be like,
Sure.
oh, this is knockback. It works like this. Knocks you into this. If you can't go there, you take extra die.
Right.
Okay, got it. Smoke grenades, they work like this. Like I have for my army, I could have handed you my gang book and not needed it
Right.
for the rest of the game.
And I think Josh's point
Because
is
mine
really
is probably not as complicated as yours.
Right.
may or may not be.
Yeah.
Josh made a point though, and I think it was really valid about it's 80-20 in that, you're going to know 80% of the stuff pretty well.
Yeah.
But when you get it, because of the complexity of Necromunda, when you get into that 20%,
Yeah.
you're really it's not like you can make an intuitive leap about how this works.
No,
you are going to
gotta
be
find this page that
Yeah.
leads you to this page that then leads you
so,
to this page.
So I think Adon, your point here that I usually would push back against in 40K and other things. I agree. I think that there is a certain amount of there's a lot of book buy-in going on for this game that isn't isn't toys. It isn't stuff on a table. It's
Some
you're
of them I
buying
bought.
books.
Some of them I bought electronically because I needed the reference, but I didn't want to lug around the books.
Right.
Yeah. I'm more and more I'm liking the electronic solution. That being said, boy, these books are high quality.
Yes,
They're beautiful.
They're very nice.
I mean, art in them, the binding, everything about them is
They're very
really,
nice.
really well done.
It's almost like we should do an episode on this stuff. There's a lot there to talk about.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, we're going to do an episode on campaigns, and then we're moving on to something else for a while.
Speaking of moving on for a while.
We've already got the schedule. We're not changing it now. Speaking of moving on, I think that's it, right?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Yes.
Okay, so let's take a short break. We're going to come back. Good God, it'll drag on forever. We'll be right back. And then we're going to get into the main topic of our show, which is extreme narrative gaming. And so we will be right back.
Hey guys, I'm Caleb,
And this is Kat.
and we are CK Studios. We want to invite you and your friends to come paint with us at one of our exciting and fun-filled airbrush and hobby weekenders. Our weekend workshops are 2 days of intense hands-on training, working directly with and learning from some of the top gaming artists in the industry.
Whether you're brand new to miniature painting or an experienced veteran that wants to up your game, CK Studios has the workshop for you. Our workshops cover everything from learning the basics and building confidence in airbrushing, all the way up to creating that centerpiece model for your army or display case.
For more class info and our upcoming schedule, you can find us on Facebook at CK Studios Come Paint With Us or register directly at ckstudios.bigcartel.com.
If you can't find a class near you, that's okay. Just contact us and we'll bring a workshop to you.
All right, and we are back, and we are now discussing extreme narrative gaming.
To the max.
So I want to talk a little bit about narrative gaming, and then we'll talk a lot about narrative gaming. So
A little bit, then a little bit more.
I think the first
Kind of to the
place we
extreme.
need to start really is kind of what does narrative gaming mean to you? And Jody, your response is incredibly well thought out here. So let's start with actually Adon.
I have feelings.
And we'll go to you, and then we'll riff a little bit on the both of what you guys have here. So,
All right.
Adon, what for you? What is narrative gaming?
One of the reasons I didn't write a whole bunch more is because I agreed with a lot of the
Jody
points
covered
that Jody
a
had
lot of
put
it.
in there.
That was kind of my
Yeah.
point too, which is
I
why
mean-
I put I'll go last.
I think that part of the problem is the way that people think about playing 40K in general, but
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
narrative gaming is more about telling a story on the tabletop more than it is about building an optimal army.
Oh, for sure.
And it's like, I don't really care if you have a battalion or not. It's about, does that make sense for what we're doing? And it's difficult for people to wrap their heads around it.
Yeah.
If you're approaching, so to me, you're telling stories with a game or series of games. Either you're taking a story that's from some of the fiction, or you've created your own story and you're using the models to do that. And for people who are coming from a match play, competitive only kind of direction, and this is true for a lot of people who play pickup games at stores.
Yeah.
That's the only way they play.
Yes.
Because that's how you
I think it's probably arguably the most common way
match
that is
play.
played.
Match
Yeah.
play is the most common way. I mean, not ITC necessarily, but just match play.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because it's match. It's easy to set up a match. So when you come into narrative gaming from that direction, sometimes it's really hard for people to wrap their heads around
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Because narrative gaming is about the story. It's about the
Yeah.
I don't know how else to say that, but it's sometimes it can be spontaneous, but it's actually better when it's pre-planned. And I think that you have to kind of look at it almost from a role-playing game kind of
Yes.
direction. And if you approach it from that direction, and I have some notes about that later, but I think that's kind of where you have to put your head. And so if you're trying to maximize your command points, you're doing it wrong.
Yep.
So
I almost feel like that could be the tagline.
Well,
What's narrative
and
gaming?
again-
If you're trying to maximize your command points, that ain't it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's not saying you're playing 40K wrong.
No.
That's
Right,
saying
no,
you're
right.
not narratively gaming.
Right. And so, like I said, some of the stuff that Jody wrote in his notes, I noticed that I wrote in some of my notes farther
So
down.
Jody,
go ahead.
talk a little bit about what your take on what does narrative gaming mean to you.
Okay. So narrative gaming for me is different, and I'm going to define something right up front. Narrative gaming is different than thematic gaming.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people hear narrative, and what you're doing is being a thematic gamer. There's no judgment here. Everybody can hobby however they like, however you want to do.
This is how you're
you do
defining
you.
it.
Right.
But there is a difference between being thematic and playing in the true sense of narrative gaming. So thematic, what is thematic gaming? It means there's a unifying story to what you're doing.
Right.
That your army has a shared identity.
Right.
You are playing Iand and Eldar. Cool. Great. That's a theme.
Right.
That's a theme. That's not narrative.
I gotcha.
Right.
This is when I saw your notes, like I thought this was an interesting distinction.
Right. And to me, it's the core of the discussion. Narrative is placing the story ahead of the mechanics of the game. The story you're telling is more important than the mechanics of the game. The rules are second to the story. Even the rules, the core rules of the game, can get dropped for the story here. And this is two or more friends who are deeply committed to the complete craft of wargaming, from hobby to storytelling to playing.
So let me tell you, this is why when I first started playing Warhammer 40K, I had a real problem with the game.
Sure.
Like I really struggled to recognize that it was I was playing with somebody too who was very much an us, me versus you.
Right.
I came from, at the time, 25 years of role-playing experience, running Dungeons and Dragons games, Call of Cthulhu, Cyberpunk, Gamma World, all those things. So like I remember distinctly we were playing and there was like this cliff face on the table, and I was like, well, can you just like move down that cliff face? Like I was like, can I just move down the cliff face? And the person I was playing was like, well, let's look in the rule book. And I'm like, why don't we just like roll a, like on a 1, like I get hurt, like going down the cliff face or something like that. And he's like, well, let's see what the rules say. And and it was at that moment that in particular, that game, that the narrative way of playing kind of broke for me. Like it was like, oh wait, okay, got it. Right. Like,
and for a lot of people, when you hear we're playing a game, that translates for them to we're using these rules.
Right.
And the point is to win.
Yeah. And that is not part of narrative gaming. Win or lost is a part of the game. I mean, it's not part of the game. You're still playing the game and competing.
But it takes a back seat.
It is not the most important part. It is not the objective of the game.
Right.
The objective of the game is no longer win or lose.
It's more of a shared experience.
Yes.
I mean,
we
would have a game and one or the other of us would be pretty far ahead. This was most common with Mike. And we'd say, you know what? Those two commanders, look how close they are. They would be fighting. They need to fight. And so you charge in knowing I'm going to lose this game if I do this.
Right.
But you had to.
Right.
Because that's what would happen.
Right.
Right. And so you do it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So narrative gaming, what is narrative gaming like to me? So that was a lot of what it isn't. So what is it? Narrative gaming is playing missions and using rules that are bespoke to the story.
Right.
That the rules are specifically in place to tell a story. Missions have been crafted to tell that story. Armies have been selected to tell that story, which requires a predetermined element that you have to have some predetermination. Now you can play a pickup game that does become narrative, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. You can embrace this style of gaming, but at its core, narrative gaming does mean some pre-arrangement and some pre-agreement.
Yes.
You can't just wander into it. It's not something you throw together.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm going to keep going back to this because this is really where the roots of narrative gaming with 40K come from, but I'm going to go back to role-playing games. There are dungeon masters or GMs out there who say a lot of times, well, I can run off the cuff and I can make this thing. I've never played in a game that is just run off the cuff that works well.
Right.
It is every time the GM is prepared, has plans, has outlines for what's going to happen, there's thought brought into it. that's where it really kicks in.
Yeah,
and
really,
and so much like that, the more preparation you spend on a narrative game, the better the experience you're going to have.
Absolutely.
And instead of a GM, maybe we have a we M.
A Wii M.
There you go.
Oh, that was good.
We master the game. Narrative gaming,
That
and
was
I
so
want to
cheesy,
go.
but so
Thank
good
you.
at the same time.
I want to go back to this point though. Narrative gaming for me is the purest expression of the full hobby. It represents the hobby in its best possible light, and it is, if there is a right way to play 40K, it is narrative gaming. It is embracing the story, it is embracing the craft, it is embracing the rules, and bringing them all together in one place at one time.
And I think it's interesting to point out that the original 40K, Space Marine, was more of a role-playing style
for sure.
game.
Yeah, Rogue
It was-
Trader had rules for the GM.
Right.
Or the, yeah.
Yeah. And so that is its actual roots of the game.
Yeah.
Now, again, there's other ways to play it, and if you don't agree with me,
Sure.
good for you. But this, to me, is the full expression. This is, you have opened up all the floodgates. You aren't holding back anywhere. Everything's on the
This is
table.
the pinnacle of the way the game can be played.
This is the best.
Okay. I would actually agree with that.
and
the
But
extreme.
to me, yeah.
In the extreme, but it's hard. Like, make no
Yes.
bones about it. It is
Yeah.
difficult. So for me, it is pre-thought, predetermined, pre-driven stories where every element of what's on the table and what's going into the rules and you and your opponent have agreed to, can't stress that point enough, you have agreed to together, is serving this story that you want to share in and that experience you want to share in.
Right.
It's a beautiful, magical thing when it happens.
Yeah. That's I think that's fantastic.
And it can be like super full blown, like you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
But and you can also do it kind of, you look at something and kind of go, oh, this would be kind of cool.
Narrative light.
Well, I mean, Mike and I were playing a game. We were playing Combat Patrol, and we were looking at the forces that we had. So what would happen here? Oh, you know what? Oh, look at this little bunker thing. These guys would be defending this thing, and they would have like a sentries out here, but they wouldn't be able to see into the tree line. So probably these guys, and you talk about what might happen, and then we did it, and we'd get to a point and go, oh, well, that's not going to work. Well, how about, if you roll a 4
Yeah.
or better, they can do this.
And in some kind,
Or this guy
sometimes-
falls down, he doesn't see them.
Yeah,
that'd be
the
great.
best laid plans are not
Yeah.
going to work out as you
Yeah.
hit the table, and you got to be flexible to
Right.
make it an enjoyable.
Still rolling
experience for
dice.
both of you.
And that's not something where we sat down for 5 hours and figured out what was going to happen in this
No.
400-point game.
Yeah.
But at the moment, we talked about what's the story we want to tell, how do we want to set up the terrain to tell that story, how do we want our models to act so it feels to us like it's real.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Carl? What's narrative
Yeah,
game?
I mean, you hit on a lot of the key points there. You touched on the role playing aspect of it, which I think, again, it draws its initial bones from the core of 40K comes from that. Now it's evolved into
Way
several
beyond that.
different ways of
Right.
playing, but it does put story ahead of mechanics, right? It is really about delivering a story. You, in your notes, didn't talk about it, but asymmetrical missions can often be a part of this. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
The last stand of,
They're most often gonna be like that.
300,
Right, right.
you got these 300 guys against a massive army. I mean, that's what a great story that makes.
Right.
Right.
That's really the focus of.
And how
did
do we
they all
make the
die?
rules
Yeah,
so
they
that
all
that can
died.
work?
Yeah, they all died.
Yeah.
But who won?
Right.
right.
So there's a lot of ways, I think, where the rules get in the way.
Yep.
Yeah.
And narrative gaming is about and that's not to say you're playing without rules. Like a lot of
No,
people who
far
are
from
cynical about narrative gaming are like, well, why do you even have rules?
It's not open play.
It's not open play. We're not saying do whatever you want. What we're saying is you're crafting something in advance and then setting to a predetermined kind of limitations or lack of limitations that you've designed.
And the degree to which you want to pre-plan is up to you and your opponent. How far down that pre-planning rabbit hole you want to go. Now, I will say this: the more people you're including,
The harder it is.
the harder it is, and the more that pre-planning needs to get done.
Yes.
Don, you and I certainly, and Carl with running your campaign through the Patreon. And I know, Don, you've run some huge games and some ongoing narratives, and obviously my background with the G3 group and helping to do a lot of those events. The more people you bring in, the more you're going to have to put that background time in, and there's no way around that.
Yeah.
But if it's just you and a buddy, you can embrace this style of hobby on a one-off. As you mentioned, you and Mike, I love hearing your guys' war stories
Right.
because they're stories.
Right. Yeah. You're telling a story. And it's interesting you say that, because one of the things we had difficulty with is that we were running an event. We wanted to run something that was telling a story, but Mike was going, yeah, but I'm running it for the store. So we can't exclude anybody, because we would set stuff up and say, but you know what? The Tyranids wouldn't be involved in this, and probably orcs wouldn't either.
Yep.
And it's like, well, right, but if we do that, then we're
You're
going to have to
excluding
figure out a way to fit them in there. And so we would have things where it's, this is happening and this is happening, and if Tyranids show up, they eat everybody, right? And so everybody's against the Tyranids. And it felt shoehorned.
Yeah.
But it was because we had to fit it into the fact that it was for a store.
And this is why,
you know?
breaking away from a store and doing things here, like we ran a campaign that was all Tyranids versus everybody else. Now I think it would be way better of a campaign. Like at that time, Tyranids were really on an uphill struggle, and it did not go well for the Tyranids. But now you also have Genestealer Cult, so Tyranids are in a pretty good place.
But I mean, that goes back to what Jody was saying about the wider you cast that net in terms of players, the harder it is to make it work well.
And this is where I'm saying sometimes, and particularly in narrative gaming, it's okay to say no.
Right.
Yeah. You have to.
This is not what's going to happen. You saw it actually there was a campaign that GW came out with in 7th edition. I believe it's called Crusade of Fire. And it was really about chaos versus Imperium stuff. And all of a sudden there's Dark Eldar there. And I remember asking them, where the hell did the Dark Eldar come into this? Like, it doesn't fit the whole theme of it. And they're like, well, Phil Kelly wanted to play Dark Eldar. And so I was like, okay. So,
you don't tell Phil no.
And they weren't going to tell Phil no, so it was like, okay, well, we'll add Dark Eldar, but it really wasn't in keeping with the rest of the thing.
And we'll touch on a little bit later on.
You can tell it's shoehorned in.
And there's ways you can work around that, and we can talk about that more a little bit later on. But there are things you can do to work around that better.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can when you're actually doing narrative gaming and you shoehorn something in, man, does it just reek
like
of
So why is it so difficult to quantify this? I mean, I felt like we just quantified what it meant to us, but why is it so difficult to explain to other people, like, this is where it's at?
I think part of it goes back to what I was saying before, is that one of the biggest areas of dissonance for people is in their head they have match play.
Mm-hmm.
And that's they want to force that match play mindset to play their narrative games. Now, don't get me wrong. Match play makes it really easy to get things started, because you say, okay, use these rules for building your army, use these rules for setting things up, and it makes it easy to kind of get things going. But if you want to tell a story, you might say, hey, you know what? This section of psychic abilities doesn't make any sense, so you're not going to have access to that. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's kind of part of the problem. People are like, well, no, but that's part of the match play rules. Well, yeah, but and again, I think that's kind of where part of the problem comes in. And I always think about, people who have, I have a battalion and an outrider, and I have the loyal 32 or the rusty 17, so I can get extra command points, kind of thing. It's like, well, no, if that's going to be such a big enough hang up, fine, we're going to set up this game, and then everybody's going to get the same number of command points. Mm-hmm. Right, or we'll figure out a way to do command points. So people get out of the mindset of building to.
Do you think that the folks that come to 40K from Magic the Gathering, potentially, they come with a different mindset as well, right? They're not coming from that storytelling mindset. It's
or video.
I'm going to play against
or
you,
video games,
and I'm going to win or lose. Like that's kind of the objective here.
I mean, I think with video games, I think it depends on the video game.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some video games that you are, like some of the more sandboxy kind of games where you do more storytelling stuff, as opposed to something like Warcraft, where it's just.
But there are times like either
do the buff, heal, attack. It's.
Yeah. I think your point though, Carl, is when people hear game, the assumption is win or lose.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And there is that automatic click,
which you can't win or lose a role playing game, by the way.
Right. You play.
That's
it's the experience.
This kind of falls into.
Right.
You win if everybody had a great time and you told a good story.
Right.
Yes.
That's how you win.
Right.
It isn't
at the end who had more points.
I think that's
Right.
actually the great summary right there.
I could live with that.
Yeah.
So does that mean we're done?
No.
Yeah, no, because I want to talk about why people struggle with this so
Yes.
Go ahead.
freaking much, because they
'Cause
do.
I think Adon raises a really good point.
Yeah, no, definitely that mindset and shooting, shutting off those match play determiners. And I'll tell you what, one of the most challenging parts is when you are new, and Matt talked to me a ton about this because Matt is still relatively new as a 40K player. Admittedly, he's starting to kind of kick my butt all over the place, but that's not saying all that much. But he is. He gave Brian's hands full the other day, which was rad, and Brian knows what he's doing. But if you go on the internet and you look up about 40K and you're trying to learn how to play,
Right.
or you go listen to most podcasts and you're trying to learn how to play, or even you go to GW and you're learning how to play, they're going to direct you to matched play.
Yep.
Absolutely.
The vast majority of words, whether they be spoken or typed out there on how to play 40K are how to, quote, get good and stomp face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the focus of.
And that's the focus.
Yeah. I just
And
watched.
it becomes the default.
I just watched. There was a video going around recently. I think I saw it initially on Reddit, and it's some YouTuber, and he and his buddies are getting into 40K, and they're gonna buy these armies and paint them up and play. And to your point, like the whole way they were approaching this, I was like, no, that's not, and they were like, oh, I spent all this time reading forums and figuring out my lists, and
Right.
this, that, and the other thing, and we're going to play in these tournaments. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, that's your objective.
That is a way to go.
That's
Right.
your objective, playing the tournaments. That's cool. But then they started talking about the limitations of all these things, and I'm like, you're looking at one small aspect of this thing, and then they're like, well, we got to build a table to play on because we don't want to just use some terrible table. And then they flash to like the alpha gaming table, and I'm like, you have no idea what you're talking about. That's a great freaking product right there, and it's more than enough for you guys to play on this thing. But no, they wanted to build this big wooden table, and I'm just like, I was watching that, and it was interesting. It was fun to watch them, but at the same time, I was like, how frustrating this video would be if I was interested in getting into 40K and then immediately landed on this channel and missed that whole
and
thing.
I think though, for them, that's what they wanted to get out of it, right?
Not saying it's wrong. Oh, and then of course they're complaining immediately about how I had to buy 4 books to play.
Right.
Sure.
And I'm like,
But I mean, and again, this goes back to what I was saying.
again, I'm not saying that what they're doing is wrong. What I'm saying
Right.
is what they're doing is a limited window with a limited view into a large universe
Right.
that they could have explored a lot of different things, but they decided this is
Right.
and I think they're completely unaware of the other aspects.
And did they
Right.
decide those things because that's all they saw on the internet?
Yes.
Well, and it goes back to what I was saying before: is that match play is your most is how you're going to get pickup games. It's how you're going to get games
Agreed.
around
Agreed.
Against people you want to
Unless you have developed friendships within the
Right.
group or start together with friends.
Right, start together with
Yeah.
friends. I mean, for me, way back when I first started, I didn't know. I went and bought stuff that I thought looked cool.
For sure,
Right?
me too.
I think most people do start that
I
way.
love these models. Okay, I'm going to get these models, and then, oh man, look at this tank. And people would look at my sisters and say, man, that's a crappy list.
Because we did the same thing.
And I'm like, I don't care. That looks cool. You know?
And see, that's the problem is the vast majority of people walk into a game store and go, that looks cool. What's this about? Oh, those guys do this. They do this. And then somebody goes, oh, that sucks. Here's what you should be doing.
Right.
And what they're saying you, quote, should be doing is matched play.
Yeah.
And it's a sickness in this game. Like I'm not kidding.
It's not a sickness.
I'm going to disagree with you. Actually,
Okay.
I agree. You're blind to the larger scope of options.
I agree with that.
Available to you, and it's very frustrating for me to when somebody talks about getting into 40K. The first thing I ask them is, well, there's a whole bunch of ways to play this game. What are you interested in doing? Because if you're just interested in going and playing in tournaments, you can do that, but you're missing out on a larger host of things. And one of the things, for example, one of the things in this video, the guy had bought the latest Psychic Awakening, and then he was complaining how it had messed up the list he had created before, but all he needed out of that were these 8 pages. The rest of it he didn't need. And I'm like, so you're just going to ignore like all the narrative stuff in there,
Right.
and all the, okay, and so to me, it's like, well, this book isn't worth my time. It's $30 and I only need 8 pages. Really? Well, but if you opened your mind to the larger narrative, that book is more valuable because there's more that applies to you now.
But it's like the people who buy the codex and they rip out all of the lore and they just spiral bind the parts with the rules in it.
Sure. And if you're playing a tournament, like, again, I want to really emphasize there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Like, there's nothing.
If that's how you want to enjoy it.
That's how you want to enjoy it. More power to you. I think there's more to it than that.
Right.
Well,
and
and in terms of it being a quote unquote a sickness, I think it's more kind of in line with what you were saying, Carl, is that it's just that you're missing out on a whole wider range of things. And so you're just being tunnel visioned.
Right. And the reason I say it's a sickness and I'm that critical of it is the sickness isn't playing competitively or open or matched or narratively. It's immediately telling somebody that if they're going to experience and enjoy the game, they have to do this.
Right.
And
Yes.
it is so common to be in a game
All
store
the
and
time.
hear somebody go, no, you don't want that unit. It's terrible.
Any
You
form.
want this.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the part that drives me nuts
Right.
because you don't know how they're playing. Are they in your group? Are they prepping for a tournament?
Right.
Or are you just quoting whatever you read about the latest ITC meta? And again, if that's what you're doing, rad. But we're talking matched play here. And if I take the stance that matched play or narrative play rather is embracing all parts of the hobby at once,
Yes.
then for me to do that, I have to be, as you said, open to all these possibilities. And the instant somebody starts saying you can't and you shouldn't and this unit is, they're closing off parts of the hobby.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where I become frustrated. And I'll be honest, the person the entity that if we're playing the blame game of why is this so hard to quantify, GW is at the front of the line.
Yeah, for sure.
GW deserves a fair amount. I love 8th. I've been very upfront about that. I think it's fantastic. Even if right now I'm trying to get my feet under me with it a little bit, GW has really done a very poor job of defining matched play.
Yeah.
Which is weird as it's the
And
core of the
supporting-
game.
And supporting match play.
Oh, it's in every book.
No.
Brush.
Yeah.
You know?
Why are they not releasing modules that you know
Tell a story.
Hey, I buy this module and it tells a story between you and you know, these two
Well, one
armies.
could argue
like how
Second
inexpensive would that be?
One could argue that Psychic Awakening is that.
Has a bit of it. A bit.
A bit. But
Here's-
If
it's
you
not-
have a Psychic Awakening, you can play with the forces that are in that book and try and go down that story road.
you can.
Here's the thing. I will say
It's not
this.
designed to have you do that.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
The reason GW, I think, isn't doing it
It is getting a
the
little closer though. You're right.
is the exact same reason that players aren't doing it. It's harder.
It's
It's
It is
just
harder.
flat out harder.
Yeah.
Open play, we get that. It makes sense. It's easy to tell somebody how to play open play. Take the toys you want, put them on the table, have fun, go nuts. Done.
Yeah.
Matched play. My
Super
God,
easy.
if there's not enough time and interest and energy
Content.
spent on content on how to play matched play, you know, wow.
Yeah.
yeah.
It is harder to do. You're right.
It's a harder way to play.
And there's a lot of hurdles you have to overcome to create a product like that is so specific. Like
Right.
we saw it with the Imperial Armor books. Like the
Yep.
initial Imperial Armor books were, you know, hey, Tau versus Imperial Guard. Here were the forces the Tau had in this battle,
Yep.
and here are the forces the Imperial Guard had. Great. I don't have those. I
Well,
need to buy those.
That's
you know.
very reminiscent of historical gaming.
It is.
Yeah.
Historical
Yeah, oh,
gaming.
yeah, very much
They'll
so.
say, you know, here's the Peninsular War from 18. And someone's going to correct me on the dates.
Whatever.
1806, and these were the actual forces. These were the orders of battle that they had.
But arguably-
see if you can, as a Portuguese, and the Portuguese and British, see if you can also push the French off the hillside.
Right. And arguably, like that's closer to narrative gaming.
Oh yeah,
Oh, it
By a
absolutely.
long
absolutely.
because it's like here's this story.
Right.
Let's see how it plays out.
Right. Right.
And GW not only hasn't addressed how do you do that, they also haven't created toolkits in the same way to do that.
Right.
And when they have, they always feel really cumbersome and tacked on. They haven't done it as well as they've done the other things. You know, and it's tough. How do you sell somebody in addition to buying your miniatures?
Yeah.
In addition to learning the rules, in addition to building and painting your miniatures, you now have an onus of responsibility as an individual to now craft your own thing. Like, why the heck did I come to you guys? Did you do anything?
Yeah.
You know, and
Well, but
GW, I know there are products out there that you can try and use for this stuff. I do.
Yeah.
And they work, but GW hasn't put it together to go, this is telling a story.
Well, and that's why I think that, like Carl was saying, if you had like a module, right? Like
It's a great way to phrase it.
When my son, he said, hey, my buddies and I went
for those who don't know, let me just give a little context.
Oh, yeah.
In the role-playing game world, especially the original like Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, you would have the rule books. You'd be able to make your characters. You could play your own games. You could make up your own stuff. A module was a predetermined adventure that you would play through.
That, yeah.
I just want to explain what it is as we're talking about.
Right. Because, and as I was going to say, that I'm not very good at DMing a game and creating the scenario
around it,
right,
yeah.
and figuring out the monsters and the threat levels. I'm not that good at it. I don't have the time for it. So I would buy a module, right? And my son he said, hey, my buddies want to learn how to play Pathfinder or D&D. I think it was Pathfinder.
Yeah.
Whatever it was. And so I went and bought a module.
Yeah.
And it tells you, okay, this is the story. Here's how you can explain the city. And I would make, I'd blow up the maps.
It would have text you could just read as the
text, right? Exactly, and you get to learn who this is the shop owner, and she's married to Joe, and they have 3 kids, and you can either give them all that info or not. But it was great because it kind of could. It was narrative gaming, right?
Yes,
You were creating the narrative, and so I agree. If you could, if GW could come out with some kind of module like that, which is similar to some of the Forge World books that they did,
a little bit.
Absolutely.
But the way I see this working, the way I could see it working, is you are not reading in advance what happens. Like it tells you, do not read forward.
Oh, right.
You and your friend begin playing. This here. We're going to tell you what the setup is. You do this, and now.
This happens.
What's the result of that? This is what happens. Or, stop halfway through the game and turn the page and read the next thing. It could be done. It would be difficult.
No, with the advent of legacy-style board games, which are board games that as you play and you go through things, you open up new little dice packs, you open up new little card packs, you put stickers on your game board and envelopes, and absolutely could be done. And the reality is, and I'm the person who's been out there saying, but you can do that. You can do it yourself. But the reality is GW themselves have not supported with a product something to do that. They leave it in the hands of the players. Open play is clear, match play is clear, and it's not left up to the players to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Narrative play has always been this and it's up, here's a toolkit, now go figure it out.
So Carl, what you were kind of talking about, and even along with the legacy games, do you remember the old Choose Your Own Adventure books?
Yes. Definitely.
You make a decision. If you do this, go to page 12. If you do this, go to page 76.
It becomes a tree campaign.
Right, it's a tree campaign kind of thing. And it's exactly what you could do with these scenarios.
Yeah. Or something akin to that. But the legacy game comparison is a really good one.
And I feel like that's where they wanted to go with Urban Conquest.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it just didn't fire off.
Well, the other problem with those games, and even the campaign I'm running, is it depends upon very much, did you win or not?
Yeah.
Right? And that's a limitation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just one door you can flip. There's a lot of things that could happen. Did your commander die? Did you lose a unit?
Did you turn on the clock and the machine?
Yeah, I mean, how many times did we play the Space Hulk thing at Adepticon, and it's like, you got to get there to flip the switch to make it easier to do this. You're not necessarily just winning.
Right.
You're accomplishing different things. Blitzball
does
this very well, right? It's not all about, did you score the touchdown?
No.
Did you accomplish these things in the attempt to do the touchdown? Gets you points. Like, there's a lot of ways to play with that, and I'd love to see GW explore it, because I agree with you. I think they haven't supported it particularly well either.
No, it's stayed in that 80s DIY kit existence that it started with. Like, oh, you and your friends just go have fun. Here's lots of rules, options. Pick which ones you want to use. Off you go. Nothing else is that way with them.
They've given you a few tools.
There are
especially
tools.
in the not Imperial Armor. What's every year comes out?
Chapter approved.
Thank you. Oh God. Yeah. Especially in the chapter approved, like this time, I noticed there was a little bit of turn to it, but I think they could really embrace this better.
Yeah, there is. Again, they give you toolkits. I'm not saying there aren't toolkits out there.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is they're not even vaguely as user friendly or as accessible, and it's for the style of gaming that most needs to be made user friendly and accessible because it's the most challenging form of gaming.
Yeah.
Right.
That it needs that hand holding, walk you through.
Yeah.
style of play, and it is difficult to quantify for all of those reasons.
Yeah.
And I think at its core, funny enough, Adon, though, I go back to, and Carl, you just touched on it, that winning and losing problem.
Yeah.
For all of my ire at GW of wanting them to make this my favorite style of gaming more popular, at the core, it is, we hear game, I line up two armies. The objective obviously is to win or lose, right?
Yes, right.
And it's so hard. And it took me so many years to get to the point where I went, no, I really don't care as long as there's a story instead.
Yeah.
It's not that if
That's
I'm
not
just
to say
playing a
we
pickup.
haven't played games where we're like, let's see who wins or loses.
Sure.
Like,
No, if
played
I'm just
plenty of
getting a
those
pickup
games.
game,
Yeah.
the point is to win or lose. That's
Yeah.
all that's going on. But if I can get a story going,
Right.
I really would rather
Now I'm
watch
way more
that play
engaged.
out
Yeah.
Right.
than I care about wins or
I would
losses.
agree. So let's talk a little bit about breaking away from competitive play into the narrative
talk more
play
about it,
section, because this is very difficult. It's something I struggle with Justin, who's not here, and I would have said this to him. Like, one of the difficult things about playing with Justin is I very much am in this narrative mindset and want to be, and it's hard for Justin to shift gears for that.
Right.
Like, I think that's a fair statement.
Sure.
And it's not a criticism. It's just, this is what he knows.
Right. And it's a way he
enjoys the game that way.
right. Yeah.
Right.
And that's great.
But it's not even just that he enjoys the game that way. Even if he wants to play the way I'm playing, it's hard for him.
Right. Because you can't unknow a thing.
Right.
You can't not know something. Once you know it, you know it.
Yes.
Right. And if you don't know, this has been like my theme this year so far, is if you don't know, you don't know.
Right.
Like it's a void. But if you do know, it goes the other way. You can't pretend you don't. So if you know that it's optimal to have this unit in front of that unit and move
Right.
this unit 6 inches ahead of that
To get
unit
the bonus for this.
to get the bonus for this, to create this synergy between these units, you can't unknow that.
Fair enough.
And if you play in a way that isn't doing that,
Yeah.
you feel like you're hamstringing yourself. You
Yeah.
feel
Or
like
that
you're
you're doing it
shortchanging
wrong.
yourself, or you're doing it wrong.
Right.
You can't forget how you, quote, should move and use a unit and engage with this and what the spacing ought to be. You can't unknow that.
Well-
And it's really difficult to ask somebody to put that aside. And it's
It's
almost
hard.
not.
It's hard for them.
It's hard for them, and it's not fair. Like, it's legitimately not fair
Yeah.
to go to somebody and say, hey, I know you know how to do that really well, and you've really trained yourself to be an excellent player.
Please don't do that.
Please don't do that.
Yeah.
No, that's not going to be fun for them.
Right.
That they're playing on.
I think that I'm going to disagree a little bit. I think if part of the reason that they are doing that is because they don't realize how to play the other way, then I think it is okay to say, no, you're not going to do that. Try this. Well, I've never done that before. Okay, well, let's try it. And if they don't like it and you continue to force them to do it, then yes, I would agree. That's not correct. That's not cool. But I think it's okay to say to somebody, no, we're not going to do that today. I mean, I'm playing an event. I'm playing a game, and somebody goes, that's one of the most like point inefficient units in your codex. Yeah, I don't care, but see, I need to have these because they're the ones who actually are protecting this gate.
Right.
It's like, what are you talking about? Oh,
And I think from an army design standpoint,
That's
I agree
exactly
with
what
you
I was gonna say.
100%.
Yeah.
right. Okay.
What I'm talking about is literal
On the table.
Once the units are on the table, there are things about how you should be spacing your units.
Oh, I see. Okay,
and
yeah,
screening and I think those are two really important distinctions.
Yeah.
That I think in an army design point approaching the table, you can tell somebody like, "Hey, we're doing a narrative thing. Pump
Make
the
your
brakes
army.
here.
Yeah. Don't
build
bring
this kind of
your
army.
super
Don't
heavy.
bring your
Yeah.
alpha thing."
Right, but the problem is
But
when you
once
say to
they're on-
somebody, "Don't bring an alpha army" or "Don't bring your hard list," folks who have not done this, they don't know what you mean by that.
I understand,
true.
but
I agree.
And so you have to try to
You have to do a lot of
formulate
pre-plan.
guidelines. But again, that's in the army construction phase. And what Jody's really talking about, I think, is again, once the units are on the table, knowing that, well, all these things benefit from around this guy, so of course I'm going to put him here. And by the way, if I bubble wrap this thing, which looks ridiculous in the sense of like a narrative, like why would all these guys stand in a circle around this tank?
Right. Well, the story where
You
Yeah.
because you're trying to protect your tank, right? That's
Right.
what you do,
yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that
And that's a very simplified example, by
Right.
the way.
But one of the ways that we would kind of try and break, and here's an example: we were doing a special scenario, and there was a building in the middle that controlled the death ray, right? And I was saying, okay, it's a building, and when you go in there, you can flip the switch, blah, 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 blah. And somebody says, well, for the rules of the building, this unit can just like one-shot it on turn 1 by just doing this.
Right.
And I said, okay, everybody hear what he just said? You can't do that.
Yeah,
right?
I get it.
You can't blow up that building. And he said, well, but then don't call it a building. It's like, okay, well, that's not what we're trying to do here today, right? And so
that
it was
individual
really hard
had a
to
very
break
hard
him out of
time.
that mindset.
Yeah.
He's thinking competitive rules like, no, we're telling a story here. You want to be able to go in and turn on the death ray, and it doesn't make sense to blow up the building so then you can't play the game, right? Or what we would do is have, okay, if you're playing on this table, it's 0 gravity, and here's the rules for 0 gravity, right? And you make up your own overlay onto the rules. And some people had a really hard time.
You used that in one of the mirror match events you did. It was a hoot. I thought that was so fun.
But it makes it so hard for some folks to kind of change. They can't change gears, right? And so, but having special rules like that, it's like, well, if you leave if you go off the edge of the spaceship, it can only travel in this exact straight line to the other side in a random number of inches.
Right.
And it's so cool, though, when you do it, to watch some people get a little light behind their eyes and kind of go, oh, wow, I never thought about doing this before. This is really cool.
Right. And there is a level of trust that is incumbent in doing something like that I think a lot of people struggle with, that if you are approaching the game from a win-loss point of view, then knowing your opponent might catch that rule, that new weird twist on the rules, they might understand it. What if they exploit it? And what if, and what if, and what if? And it's tough to ask people to go, I need you to put all that down.
Or then once they find the exploit that maybe you didn't see when you set up the thing to go, okay, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Right. We're not doing that.
One of the defining things is it's rules as intended, not necessarily rules as written.
Right. And that's hard.
And that's hard for people.
Yep.
And I think that's probably a great way to explain, like, hey, if you've only known competitive gaming, you've only known, and it's funny because I hear a lot of people say like, oh, I'm not a competitive gamer, but, and then they go on to explain that they're just playing a different version of competitive gaming. Like, if you're primarily using matched play rules, that's your default rule set and your default way of looking at the game, you're playing competitively.
Yeah.
That is what you're doing. And it's not a value judgment. That's the way you like to play Rad. Sure. But it's not narrative gaming.
Right.
Narrative gaming means that the story comes first and the rules are second.
Right.
It means that, it's not about points efficiencies. And I laugh at that. And that's part of why I love Power Level so much, is it throws that out the window almost immediately.
Yep.
Right.
And it's not that it's perfect.
But this is also why the people who I know that play in those scenes that I have played, I said, we'll just try Power Level. And they're like, I hate this because I can't do this and I can't do this. And I'm like, exactly.
Right. Because that's not the point.
Yeah, that's not the point.
Point. So how do you break away? I get why it's difficult, but like breaking away, you could start with a new army. I know Colin and some guys tried this, or a new game system even.
Right.
But like trying new armies and literally trying to be like, I'm not going to go online and look at the 8 million. Basically, I'm not going to look up anything online about this army because I'll instantly get bombarded on how to, quote, get good. Right.
I think one of the best ways to do that, quite frankly, would be if you were unfamiliar with the army, look at what looks cool to you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, don't even look at rules. Don't even look at the rules.
Oh, absolutely.
Hey, that Hive Tyrant model looks pretty cool. I'll take one of those. And then I really like Raveners. I'll take a bunch of Raveners.
Right.
Because that looks kind of cool.
One of my Warhammer Fantasy GT armies, I really like cavalry. I like the idea of horsemen and cavalry, and so my first army was Bretonnians, and so I was like, I really want to do a chaos army, but everybody has to be on a horse.
Right.
So it was all knights and marauder horsemen and which
makes sense.
Chariots.
Right.
The chariots and all that kind of stuff. And I really liked it, right? And I went to go play, and people are like, that's really not going to be super effective. It's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
It's really cool. It's this guy riding into battle with all of his horsemen. I love it. Now, it wasn't narrative per se.
It's theme.
But it was a theme, right? But I didn't care. I wanted it to look a specific way, right? And if you happen to pick something, say, oh, I want to have everybody on jet bikes. Oh, it just happens that 36 jet bikes is a good army. I mean, you might luck into a good theme.
But those are all themes.
Right.
Yes.
Those are themes. It's not narrative. Right.
But they're a great way to get started.
Yes.
It's a great way to break away from.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this just occurred to me. I don't have it in my notes. I apologize, you guys. But one of the ways, if you're primarily a matched play player and you're defaulting that way, it's almost like
interested in
exploring this. You're willing to take on the challenge. It's like going to the gym when you haven't in a long time. Get a buddy. Get somebody that wants to go with you.
Yep.
Somebody that's willing to explore that brave new wilderness. You're going to have to. And the two of you are going to have hopefully similar habits that you've played in the past. Your level of competitive will be similar. So you can go in with trying to tell your story and trying to make that the focus of what you're doing. You can start with a theme, but I'd really encourage you push past a theme to an actual collective shared story. If you can do that, if you could find either a new group in an extreme case, but a buddy that's willing to go down this pathway with you, I think then you've got a real shot. You could actually start, because you can play narratively at a very competitive level once you're on the tabletop.
For sure.
You can really have some real cutthroat games knowing what you know about how to move units and space units and screen units and shield and overlap and auras.
All that's fine.
That's all fine. But your story will be first. And if the two of you make that agreement and you trust each other enough, and this is why you need that buddy, is you'll trust each other enough to go, that doesn't quite seem right for our story. And you'll trust that person to go, you know what, you're right. What about this instead?
And that's one of the notes I have down further is you have to be willing to call each other out.
Yeah.
Right. And I totally agree with you. You have to start from the position of, hey, this is something we want to do with more than one person.
Yeah.
And because you can't just, walk into the game sort of like, hey, I'm going to do this narrative thing. And everybody looks like no, we're practicing for LVO, so we're not doing that.
So false.
No. But one of the really good ways to do that in terms of breaking away is pick a story that you like. From a codex, from the rule book,
from idea.
Somewhere, from a video, whatever. You look at it and you go, oh, this is a really cool story. How can we tell this story on the tabletop? Well, these are the forces that are involved. Oh, neither one of us own these armies. That's cool. That's probably the best way to go.
Yeah.
But even if you do, it's, even if you own every army, that's fine. You kind of say, okay, well, who was in this fight? Hell's Reach.
Right.
There was, one unit of Black Templars, and there was all these guardsmen, but they didn't have any tanks. And there was there was one Titan, and there was, you could almost build the forces right out of just by reading the novel. Right?
Yeah, right.
Same thing with the Codex and with some of the other lore that's out there. That's how you build your story. And again, it goes back to role playing, right? You kind of say, okay, what were the forces that were involved here? How do we, historical battle idea, how do we put those forces together? Oh man, because one of the things we talked about when we do the show of force is, what was a battle that you liked? Right.
Yep. And a lot of times they'll give you like some, it was only the first company of Terminators that were involved here. Okay, great.
Right. Yeah. Or this, this happened and they were defending this shrine and this thing happened and the Necrons came in and you kind of, well, let's see if we can tell that story and see if this time the sisters don't get killed to a woman.
Right.
And yeah, if you're going to do that, I'm sorry, there's no way you're going to have 6 exorcists in this army.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
It's not part of the story.
Right.
And you know what? I love this idea, Don, 8 million %, because I think it's going to get you to a narrative place as a gamer.
And that's what we're talking about, breaking away.
Right,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
And I would even caution, I love this, and also don't use a match play scenario.
No.
Don't, just because it says that, or don't use a narrative play scenario.
No.
Don't use a pre-made scenario at all. Make it yourself.
Yes.
The focus is exactly, as you said, Adon, who was here?
Right.
Let's focus just on that.
Yeah.
That's step 1. Okay, now what happened?
Right.
Now how do we set that table?
Right.
And everything else, you can certainly look at match play and narrative play scenarios as inspiration, but don't use a preformed one as a caution on this idea.
Right.
But it's a super idea. I think that's a fantastic way to take that step.
Don't go into it when you look at it and kind of go, oh, well, we can't do that because it's not a battalion. So what?
Yeah.
I don't have 3 troops choices. So
It
what?
doesn't matter. You don't.
Doesn't
have
matter.
To,
That's not part of the story. And one of the ways, we're kind of bleeding into kind of how do you
that's
do
fine.
this?
Let's go ahead.
But I mean, whether you're doing it with 2 people or 3 people or 4 or 6 or whatever, sit down.
Again, easier with smaller groups.
It's easier, much easier with small groups. Sit down, get something to drink, get your favorite beverage, get something to eat, and brainstorm what it is you want to do. What's the story you want to tell? What's the thing? And maybe it's, maybe Jody, you and I played a really cool game. Your demons against my sisters, and this cool thing happened. Oh well, what if we were to expand on that core thing that happened?
Yep.
How would we make that into a bigger game? Right? We
mean,
have this planet, and we have 6 of us, and 2 of us have like 80,000 points of orcs. Well, wouldn't it be cool? There was this orc invasion that just came in. And I'm thinking about what happened in Santa Cruz, right?
You're literally, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And how do we set that up? And it would be really cool if they like took over this, they came in out of the space into this refinery, and we have to if they hit this part of the refinery, it blows up, and this could happen. And
right. And that's organically all of the G3 events. And I mean, we had games there was literally a game with 40,000 points on each side,
right.
An apocalypse game that literally started at 2 guys playing a 700 point game and just get thrown down. I went, oh man, this thing happened. Wasn't that cool?
Yep.
That was so fun. Well, what should we do next time? Well, what about this and this?
Right.
Okay, cool. You can even start with any old scenario, but instead of being focused on who stomped who, what happened?
Right.
Like what actually happened? And then just letting that inform every game that happens.
And then recognizing when it reaches, some things are not going to go as planned. Like you may realize, there was a flaw in the way we thought of this. Colin and I played a series of games between I think it was my Death Guard and his Adeptus Mechanicus at the time, where we created rules for how a demon was going to get summoned. He actually even made the rules on this. Your greater unclean one comes in, so you're going to try to do this. I'm going to try to stop you. We also have these buildings we can go in, and I created this scenario where we had these buildings with Zone Mortalis tiles. So if you went in the building, then you were in the Zone Mortalis area. Yep. But I quickly realized, wait a minute. So what happens though, like when you go into the building, like where do you start and can you assault out of that? And so just right there, we were like, okay, well, wait a minute. Let's just create it like embarking or disembarking from a vehicle. So you can, go in, you're basically disembarking as you pass through the door. So yes, you could assault, you could come through the door and assault if you chose to. Okay, great. That sounds like that would work. And we just went with it. Turned out to be an incredibly fun mission. Yeah. So yeah, I agree. You make your own mission. And when you're doing that, think about like, what are each of the army's objectives here?
Right.
Like, if the orcs' objective is just, we want to destroy everything. Okay. Factor that in. Your objectives don't have to be the same.
Right.
The orcs can be, our objective is for every unit we kill, we get a point or whatever. Your objective is you're trying to defend this area. So maybe if you hold that area, you get X amount of points. Plus, for every unit you kill, you get a point.
Well, and I would argue, and this is just me, when I'm doing narrative and storytelling stuff, I don't give quote unquote points for killing stuff. I always make
it would depend on the objective of the
I always
army,
want it to be something that they're doing in the story.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Right? I got to turn on the death ray. I got to blow up the Promethean tanks. I got to do this or I got to do that. And it may sound very attacker defender, but it's not a matter of, well, I killed 90% of your army. You only killed 10% of my army, so therefore I win. I get more points. It's, you had 2 guys left, but they turned on the death ray.
Right.
Yeah, and I get you, but in some cases, that's not going to be appropriate, right? The Tyranids are not going to turn on a death ray. So the Tyranids...
right, that's not the story you're going to tell it.
Right, but that's my point. My point is the Tyranids' objectives are going to be completely different from everything else. And historically, Tyranid objectives are to eat everything, turn it all into goo. Right. So I mean, you can play around with a lot of different
But the objective could be that the Tyranids eat all of the non-combat models
you
on the
could
table.
You could create whatever you want.
Right. So you have this town of people you're trying to protect.
What I'm saying is you don't want to limit yourself either to saying, well, I don't give... Like, this is an entire type of thing I'm going to dismiss.
Okay.
Right? Flavor, seasoned to taste, right?
Right. Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
But
absolutely.
I would say don't eliminate a whole swath of thing. And later in this episode, you're going to hear from the narrative guys, who are a group of guys that run narrative events at different events that we've gone to. Like they run it at Adepticon. Last year they ran one called Nurgle Don't Surf.
Right.
And it was incredibly thematic. And their method for designing this, as you'll hear in their interviews, very similar to what you were describing about sitting around a restaurant, proposing ideas, seeing, shooting down ideas, seeing what works or what sticks, and then saying, hey, let's try this and see what happens. And when you play in their events, they're basically GMing the event.
Yeah.
Right.
You almost have to with people who are not used to doing this.
Yeah.
You have to have somebody who can say, no. It was kind of like I was saying with the guy who wanted to blow up the building.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we're not doing that.
Right.
Everybody, no, that's not happening. That rule doesn't apply. Well, it's in the book. No, not today. It's not. Oh, watch, I'm going to cross it out of the book.
Hey, look at there. Yeah, GM don't care.
Right.
It is difficult to grasp, and it does take a lot of preparation and pre-planning.
It's the kid in the cereal aisle.
Yeah.
You can have anything you want, and it's all available. You just have to choose.
And this is why I think a lot of times campaigns feed into this. And we see this in Necromunda, right? Where the real power of Necromunda is the campaign and the story it tells. And you took over this territory, and like there's benefits to that territory, but now like I took over, I don't even remember the name of the territory I took over today, but I do know, boy, it was cool because it was like geared towards my Goliath guys, right? And I was like, yeah, so of course I want that. I don't even know what it does, but yeah, I want that. And I'm gonna push these guys out of it because this is my area, right? Like, and then at the end, I'm like, okay, so what do I get for this?
Right. Well, that was mine when we started. I was like I said, my guys were this like Prometheum pump, and whatever. I was like, oh, they work in some kind of gas industry thing. And so I just went through, was like, which one of these sounds like something that would have to do with gases, and that's why they're all wearing gas masks.
Right.
Cool.
Right,
this is the territory I want.
And so the reason I mentioned the campaigns at this point is because I feel like campaigns give you an opportunity to begin to expand that narrative. Not only are you, I almost feel like it's much harder to just tell a narrative, have a narrative thing in one game.
Unless you take the historical approach like Adon was talking about.
Yes.
And what's funny is every time I've ever done that, and people are like, oh, and if it doesn't work, we'll just run it back. Every time we've ever done that, I'm going to do a one-off historical. And if it didn't work, we'll just fine-tune it and we'll do the historical game again. Every time, the next time we go down, we're like, no, let's do the next step and let's do the campaign thing.
Yeah, let's just see what happens, right? Yeah. And so Forge World did a tremendous job. And they have kind of what I call like predetermined campaigns and then undetermined campaigns. Yep. And the predetermined campaign was exactly what you were talking about, Adon, where it's hey, this is the Battle of Waterloo. Right. But in space. Right?
Yeah, right.
Like this is the Battle of Waterloo or whatever. And what happened was this type of thing happened, and then this commander was killed, and that happened, and they were pushed back, and then eventually this is what happens at the end of the war. Now here are the units that took place in each of these missions. Now you play it and enjoy.
And see if it happens again.
See how it works for you.
Yeah.
And this was really, really evident in Siege of Rax in the Taros campaign. Yep. The Badabor was a great example of that. Although the Badabor started to introduce like a kind of little bit of a different campaign system. Mm-hmm. But where they really embraced it was when they went to these undetermined campaigns, which I think is still the best one to date, the Fall of Orpheus. And I've talked about this before. It's Necrons versus IG and Space Marines, Minotaurs specifically. And I think what are the Vrax guys? The Deathcore Krieg. Right. And so there is this story that is told in the book, as they do in Forge World books. Hey, then this happened, and then this planet was destroyed, and this one went silent, and this happened. And then they leave you at a point, and they say, now half the system has gone dark with the Necron advance. So now you're going to fight and determine what happens. Right. And they don't tell you the end of the story. Like they leave you hanging. And I was like, that is amazing. Like now we get to decide how it ends through our series of games.
And you see that with linked campaigns where you say, okay, we're going to fight for this planet. And then depending on what happens there, you either go to this planet or that planet, it's the branch campaigns. Yeah.
And I think this is the closest they've gotten to narrative. But again, it falls victim to that. Did you win or did you lose?
Right.
Right.
And the other thing is that the unpredetermined ones, you build your own list.
Yes.
Right? So people are doing the optimal, suboptimal thing.
Yeah. Now they do create a few guardrails to keep you kind of in line, right? Like they'll say in that particular one, if you have a particular character. So let's say I take the whatever his name is, Astarak, or the chapter master of the Minotaurs. He can only be in one of the war zones. So all the games I play in the other war zones, because they're supposed to be happening simultaneously, I cannot take him.
Right.
So I mean that starts to get into what I'm talking about, right? Now you're like, oh well, he's over there, so he can't help you over here.
Right. Or because of the gases on this planet, you can't have any tanks.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Or they're at a penalty or something.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So now you have to change up.
And
well,
I think that
take?
being able, if bringing in things, I wrote it somewhere. I don't know if it's in this section, so sorry if I'm jumping ahead or behind. But
that's okay.
Things like the Death World rules, and what I was talking about, the zero gravity rules, and some of these other rule things that you overlay onto these different sets of games helps with that kind of storytelling aspect.
Yeah.
I like it better when you decide what story you're trying to tell beforehand.
Yeah, I agree.
But when you're running an event for larger groups of folks where there's going to be people participating, the Death World things and the other kind of overlay rules can help with people telling those stories.
Yeah,
and it can. And you have to really be able to call people out and say, no, that doesn't, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Right. You have to be willing to do that. And sometimes you really have to have, a GM, or you have to have somebody who's in charge. You'll see a lot of times they'll say no named characters.
Yeah.
At all.
That's actually what started me as a narrative gamer. Was that idea combined with what you were just talking about, Carl, of
creating your own characters.
Well, not only creating your own character, but the idea of why is this guy at every battle?
Right.
If this is Marnius Calgar, he's a busy man. Manny C's got some stuff to do, right? And so does Bobby G.
Yeah.
They're busy boys.
Yes.
They don't have the time to show up at your game every time. And I just kind of was joking around
he's on
saying
that table too.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, look, he's on that. And I was like, man, like that just doesn't jive with the story.
Only one Primarch came back.
But it is. It's that notion of those things, and it's funny because I have this weird sense that I've never really had until we were just talking about it. I feel like, and I don't want us to give the idea that these narrative events seem to be run as narrative events. And narrative events are fantastic. I mean, I'd be the biggest hypocrite ever if I was like, our narrative events are dumb. That's, that's like, kind of how I really got my full hobby on back in the waybacks. But it really can just be the two of you.
Yes.
Right? It's just you and a buddy sitting down doing a thing.
Yes.
So, and that's really where I think it's best. Like, I
agree.
You always have to shoehorn it.
It's more intimate.
Yeah.
At that point.
And it feels weird, but I think it's an important point.
Or, like the narrative guys have done in many occasions, they may have 4 or 5 guys playing, but they have set the scenario. They have provided all the models.
Right.
You're going to do this. You're going to do that. You're going to do this. That's your objective. You guys over here, your objectives are to do these things. We're playing these enemies.
Right.
Yeah. I agree. For a structured event, I think that's very good. You got to do that. But I agree with Jody wholeheartedly that it's so much better when 2 or maybe 4. It's really hard to go much farther than that.
Yep.
I agree.
To sit down and agree, what is the story we're trying to tell? What forces do we think make sense for this? And that's how you start. I mean, Mike and I used to use the battle missions thing, which had one that was slanted against you, one that was even, and one that was slanted for you.
Yeah.
And we'd pick the forces that were involved, and we'd play it. But even with that, we kind of go, okay, well, these are the scenarios, but why is this happening?
Right.
Why are we doing it? And we would always, and maybe it's because he's a manga editor, so he's always thinking story. Whatever it was awesome, right? But we'd sit down and go, that doesn't make sense. That guy wouldn't be there. That whole unit, why would that unit be there? Yeah, you're right. It doesn't make any sense. Let's redo that.
Yeah.
And it, it's really about sitting down and deciding what story you're telling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the
It's
great thing
narrative.
about this is too, like maybe you really like to play with planes,
Yeah.
flyers, or
Right.
tanks.
Right.
So one of the great things about linking games together like that is you can maybe have one section where it's like, well, because of the rough terrain or the jungle terrain,
Right.
the tanks can't really be used and
Right.
flyers can't be used here. So it's primarily infantry or maybe some walkers. But in the next section, we're going to open it up, and now it becomes the tank
Right.
battle that, so
Right.
you can begin to like adjust your,
And we had
so
exactly
everybody
that.
gets a chance to have some fun at it.
Sure.
We at a time when flyers are really powerful.
Yep.
We had it. Okay, these are all jungles, and if you're using a flyer, you have a percentage chance where the wildlife can get into your engines and it crashes.
Love it.
Right. So you're taking a chance, right? But then we had a day that it was only aircraft.
That was such a fun day.
To really embrace it,
Right.
right?
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
great.
Were you there that day?
I was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, brought the orcs.
So I mean, I think that those, and that's an area where you're doing a kind of a trade off. Hey, John loves his planes,
You sure did.
right? And so let's find a way for John to really love to use all of his planes,
And to be
then have
fair, it
another
was
day where
because
say, sorry, John, but your planes are way too powerful in a regular game. So if you want to use planes, great, but there's going to be a penalty for
and
it.
it was because John was like constantly getting
yeah.
a bunch of grief about it, and then finally like, you know what, John, it's your turn.
Yeah.
Right?
And
Let's make
he-
it fun for you.
He was in his element.
Oh, he
It was
loved it.
awesome.
And not only can you link games like through tailoring to what each kind of person likes, how they like their 40K, but I mean, the reality is we've never been in a time when there's more ways to play the game
Oh, yeah.
easily.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to play a couple kill team missions. Oh man, I wonder what this is going on. We're going to play a 40K game. Matt and I actually just talked about this. We've been doing this kind of slow burn narrative between his sisters or my sisters and his Gene Stealer cult. And we got to this point where we're like, you know what? Actually, a kill team game is going to be better. We need to play some kill team games to sort out how this next step,
Yeah.
like we were projecting ahead. So our next mission, we know what it's going to be,
Yep.
but it seems like it's probably going to play out like this. So then the next thing's going to be some kill team stuff's going to have to happen. And
Right.
like, okay, what's that going to look like? And then Carl, you and I just spent some time chit chatting about Apocalypse, which is a whole nother part of this equation. So linking games across systems is never been easier.
And the new
Right.
chapter approved gives some advice on how to
Right.
do that, which is actually pretty great.
And we actually did an episode where we talked about that.
Yeah. And we talked about no named characters, but there's also some character creation
Yeah.
in that narrative open
Which is
gaming
really
space
cool.
that
Yeah.
you can utilize. And you can create your own to have like a little unique, and that's a whole nother level of real
Right.
fun. And again, it doesn't matter that, hey, this guy seems really powerful. Okay, great. So he seems powerful. Like it doesn't,
Why is he so powerful?
when you're
though?
abandoning,
Why is he right? Exactly.
when
Why
you're
is he so powerful?
abandoning the win or lose options of this, that becomes, oh, he's that powerful. Well, now he's a target because he's that powerful.
Sure.
And you get to add some of your own character and flavor to him.
Yeah.
Sure.
You
Just
get to
like
create-
our challenge.
You get to create your oh, that was very nicely done. You get to create your own Araman or your own
Right.
whatever.
Sure.
Right.
And this is one of the things that we used to
Of course,
try.
my guy's more powerful than Araman.
Broad Get Grinded just about geeked old Magnus in our APOC game.
Oh my
so
God.
that was so close.
One of the things we like to try and kind of help people along with this was we actually gave people extra credit if they wrote a story about
yeah.
why their army was
course,
there.
yeah.
Or wrote a story about why did you create that captain? What is it about that captain?
And you know what would have been awesome is what if instead of taking that, two people had like come up with a conjoined story and
Yeah.
then came to you and
Oh my
said,
gosh.
"Oh, yeah, well, see, I'm here because he hates that guy."
Yep.
And we've, and then all of a sudden you've been like, "Whoa, okay, they put in
that's
more thought into this."
absolutely. Yeah, and so what's nice about that is we had some people who they were match play, competitive, but when we kind of pushed them into this, they just really had a great
Some people can
time.
really embrace it.
They really had a great time with it, and they were like, I thought I was gonna hate this, and this was really fun.
Yeah. Well, again, going back to the narrative guys who you'll hear from in a few minutes, what was interesting about those guys at Adepticon last year was, I don't think you were there.
I
Jody,
chit chatted with him a bunch. I didn't get
but
to play.
it was
their game.
it was Ian and Austin, and they had an opening, and they were like, "Hey, we're looking for a couple people if you guys want to play." And I couldn't because I was going off to run like my Call of Cthulhu thing, and I was like, "You guys should really participate." And I had to cajole and push them into it.
Yeah.
Afterwards, I was like, "How did it go?" They were like, "That was the best thing ever."
Yeah.
You know, like they were like, "We're so glad we played." And I was like, "I told you, those guys know what they're doing, man.
Yeah.
It's really fun." So let's leap to the terrain considerations here around narrative play.
Oh yeah.
Because, a long time ago, I called terrain the third army on the table.
Yes.
And we, over the course of the day playing Necromunda, saw terrain be hugely beneficial. But and it just to the story it was telling. Like, as we were trying to fight for different areas, I think my first one was like almost like a junkyard area. We were like, well, what about this table? This table looks more junkyardy than those tables. And I really felt like, ooh, I'm defending this like junkyard from these guys. Like it was great. And it was Josh's table that he had built, and it was super fun to play on. But it really, the terrain, if it's matching the story you're telling, if you're saying, oh, we're in a jungle, but all I have is snow terrain, rethink your story.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
because it's going to draw you in or break that story for you.
Right. And you can either go from, we want to tell this particular story, oh gosh, now we need to build some terrain to do that. Or you can look at the terrain you have.
Or you could go, oh yay, we get to build that.
Oh
terrain.
yeah, you can say, oh yay, yes, yeah. I'm sorry, yes.
Like a spaceport table.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Hey,
or you can look at the terrain you have, which I've done a bunch of times, and you kind of go, okay, well, what is this?
Yeah.
Oh, that's this. Oh, wouldn't it be cool if this guy was coming from here? Oh yeah, that should have a tunnel that comes over here.
Don,
Oh,
how's your spaceport table coming?
Well, I have all the components, but moving kind of threw me off. But the
listen, buddy, I've had my spaceport table failure for a lot longer than you.
yes.
No, I think this is a great point, Don, and I think there's never been a better time to do this than now.
Absolutely.
Because you get all these, like, the gene circles got that crazy freaking
The drill.
Yeah. And
Oh, yeah.
the AOS last, like, what are the permanent spells called?
The
Endless spells.
Endless spells. Those make cool terrain doodads
yeah.
to fight over.
Sure.
And, like, every army, the
Yeah.
Noctilith crown for the Chaos Marines, and,
Yep.
like, yeah, I keep going. Sorry, I interrupted. But
No. It's exactly, and see, but see, the kind of thing you're doing right now is exactly how you build narrative.
Yeah.
You riff off of each other and you talk, oh, remember that drill? Oh, yeah. Oh, man, that drill would be awesome because you could put it with this piece. And then they're trying to attack that, but it can only get to it through the subterranean. And then you start going back and forth. And would it be cool if they could do this? Yeah, I need another beer, though. So, by the time you finish, and you should maybe like write an outline, right?
Yep.
especially if you're
Take notes.
imbibing.
Yeah. But you can take the stuff that you have and just make some really cool, or you can see some terrain that's for sale and you kind of go, oh my gosh, that's the headquarters right there. Right. And so, and it's a great opportunity for making the terrain, it has to be an integral part of your story.
Yeah. Without a doubt.
Sorry,
So,
I got
but it makes
No, you literally accidentally described Matt and I's next game.
Oh, okay.
So it must be a good idea.
And one of the things about terrain is it does take up a lot of storage space. So,
Yeah.
So be aware of that. But I mean, these are opportunities to explore areas you haven't really explored before. And boy, if Google is good for nothing else, it is good for looking at pictures online. If you want to look at wargaming terrain,
Pinterest.
Yeah.
Pinterest,
well, a lot of time those Google links will lead you to Pinterest.
Yeah.
So,
but Pinterest has, and there's so much stuff there, and I have a couple of different kind of boards for the spaceport ideas and trying to
that you just store those pictures in.
Store the pictures in there, and the nice thing about Pinterest is it says, hey, we've got some suggestions for you, and you look at, oh man, I didn't think about doing that. That's really cool.
Yeah,
but for me, it's kind of like, I want to kind of almost start with the end in mind.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. What is it I'm trying to do? I want to, we want to tell this story. We want to get to this place. We want it to end up with an apocalypse game or whatever.
Sure.
How are we going to get there? Here's the stuff that we have. How do we want to get there? And then other times it's just like, you're just riffing on each other. And sometimes it comes from either this epic moment that happened in a game, or it's this bunker that you own, or
it could be
whatever.
any source of inspiration.
It could be anything of inspiration.
I used to, when I would write adventures for Dungeons and Dragons, I would always focus on like the climactic fights.
Yep.
Right? So I'd be like, okay, I've got this guy and he's got these 3 lieutenants, and they're going to have to basically work their way through, discovering what each lieutenant is up to, and that'll lead to the final conflict.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to have this one battle, and I really want to have this battle on a bridge that's over this chasm.
There you go.
Okay, so how do I get the characters to the bridge over the chasm? And that's where the battle's going to take place. And so, the players would play through a series of things, and then not realizing that, at this point, this is where the major conflict is going to resolve. And then you'll have a whole bunch of things leading to the next major conflict.
Right.
And so, yeah, I like your point of starting at the end or starting at the pivotal moments.
Right. What are the key things you want to have happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
go
just
from there.
I think not only that key piece, because then you can pick up that piece of terrain if that's something you need, and be working on that. But then also, you can think about how can we tie in the existing parts of our collective terrain collection to backwards tell that story, just like you're saying. So like we're going to have a battle on a bridge. Do we have anything we can use? No. Okay, so we got to build the bridge. So what's building up to getting to that point? Okay, then we got to build to this with this. Oh, but I have this thing and I have this thing. And that's literally the early G3 days. It was just about, well, who's got what? Who's got what? And then it was like, okay, well, we don't have this. Well, I guess we all got to do a day and we're going to get together and build, one of our very first missions was the beach invasion, Normandy style. And so we went, well, nobody's got a cliff that's 16 feet long. So we need a 16-foot long cliff face. So
then you guys built the spaceship. This was all before Zone Mortalis had ever come out, right? We had an interior battle in that spaceship. It was incredible.
Yeah, a little dry ice goes a long way, and it's something I miss almost about terrain where it's at now. Not to wax too far off topic, but that a lot of times
personalized now.
It's all like bespoke and like there's a lot you can do with just a box. There's a lot you can do with just a couple pieces of cardboard
for sure.
And some
I was looking at
scissors
some of the pieces that Bill had on his table.
Oh, it's incredible.
And I look underneath, it's just his little pieces of plastic blocks, but he draped like a tarp over it and
with
made
glue,
it
so it looks like just a tarp hanging over it. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Oh, that's kind of neat.
Yeah, a little of the DIY has faded away.
Well, let's do this. We're going to take a short break. We're going to come back. I have an interview with the narrative guys, which we've been talking about, and those guys are just a lot of fun. And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about kind of taking your narrative even further and getting really, really embedded in it. So we'll be right back.
If you're a true follower of chaos, enjoy killing Tau scum, fry devilfish for breakfast, drink the blood of fire warriors, collect the bones of Kroot fodder, desecrate the cockpits of mantas with demonic sigils, sing songs of chaotic praise and joy, when berserkers chain axe overwatching broadsides, Helldrake Bellflame shield drones into flying discs of spinning fire, and just all around bask in the path to glory, then the Shrine of Chaos podcast is a must-listen for you. I'm Mini Wargamer Dave from MiniWargaming.com, and I invite you to be a champion of chaos. Listen to the Shrine of Chaos podcast wherever podcasts are downloadable. Thank you, independent characters, for allowing this message from the Eye of Terror.
All right, so I am joined by Dan and Glenn, who are two of a group known as the Narrative Guys. And hey, guys, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Earl. Thank you very much. Good to see you again.
Yeah, for sure. So we were, I assume you guys are going to be at Adepticon this year.
Oh, yeah, indeed.
I figured as much. Oh, is this the trench stuff you've been working on?
Yeah, where the trench table's going. Yeah, we're hosting the Iron Cage, a battle of the Iron Warriors versus the Imperial Fist in a trench fight.
Nice. Okay. So you guys, I think I first ran into you guys at Adepticon. And you guys have been kind of notorious for making just amazing narrative play events that are sometimes wacky, sometimes really, really, deep. And so I thought as we're doing this show, you guys are the perfect ones to get involved. Now, I'm just talking to two of you, Dan and Glenn. Who are the others that are involved in your group?
So we have two guys from the old Hitting on Threes podcast, Sean and Matt, as well as a friend of ours who used to work at Reaper, Pat, and David and Phil, who have been around and played games with us forever. So we basically just, co-opted our local group to help us out because we needed manpower.
Okay, and so let's talk a little bit about some of the things you have done. And since I've been at Adepticon, let's start with Adepticon. Give me 2 or 3 of the examples of events you've run at Adepticon.
So when we looked at Adepticon, we went up to Adepticon. We had just an absolute amazing time, and we're like, we really want to do this show, but we don't want to drive 8 hours both ways.
Right.
And
it was a truck full of terrain.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Hoping it doesn't rain at any point. And so we thought about what we wanted to do, and we hit upon this idea of why don't we just do a really deep narrative event where we bring both sides and we play the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we wanted to do something that was compact. That was we looking at the Adepticon format. One of the things we were impressed with is that so many of the event attendees aren't committed to a multi-day commitment. Right. I mean, they'll get involved in their event, they'll be done, but they love the idea of stopping and going to a panel or making going and playing a couple-hour games. So we said, hey, let's leverage that rather than doing a 3-day or 2-day long narrative event with multiple games. Let's just do a one single, get it over in 2 hours, palate cleanser kind of game.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where we dug in.
That is
and
truly,
then do it multiple times.
That is truly one of the things I enjoy about Adepticon. Like, I don't like being locked down for 2 or 3 days on one thing. I like kind of going around socializing, as you said, doing palate cleansers and then doing maybe 1 or 2 bigger things, but that's about it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in many other convention cultures like role-playing and board gaming, that's much more the standard, and it's interesting that we have these marathon-level things. I mean, I can see it from the perspective of competitive, where you're trying to run through a rank of standings and you have to play a number of games to get the results. For the rest of us who are just playing for fun, what if we shift that model a bit? Let's play with the ideas and let's challenge that.
Yeah.
So the first year that we did it, we brought up Thunderhawk Down. So we had our little slums village, and we had a line of Imperial Fist rhinos that had to get through the slums village as cultists and Nurgle guys were attacking them to get to this downed Thunderhawk we had at the other end of the table, and then get a VIP and get them off the table.
Right.
Each player was managing just about a squad and maybe a support unit. Right, we had 4 players on the blue side and a couple of red players that were hosted by us as games masters.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, the most interesting thing about that, actually, after playing, so we played it multiple times over the weekend. We were very pleased with our attendance and had a lot of standby guys that helped show up when other people didn't show up. But it was the most memorable moment for me was at the end of it. We had several players that had run through it at least once and came back to us at the very last game on Saturday and wanted to play the other side. They wanted to play Nurgle. They wanted to play the Chaos and Nurgle guys, and wanted us to run the Imperial Guards. And so we went, okay, let's go right at it. And so it really embraced what we have in our narrative guys rules of rule number 3 of it's your game. If we see something that's a great idea from a player that's totally doable, we're like, sure, let's roll with it.
Yeah, I remember you guys telling me that actually at the end of that Adepticon. You were like, oh, these guys wanted to play our side of it. That's incredible.
I think they wanted to make sure we weren't stacking the deck.
Right. Yeah, and needless to say, we won pretty handily because we had spent 2 days going, well, if they'd only done this.
Right, we run the event 8 times. Now we're like, oh, don't make that mistake. Don't get out of the rhinos. Charge the rhino as an example.
Yeah.
So, but that was an interesting moment, though, for us where we were like, okay, how do we make this an interesting and fun thing? Why isn't it 2 opposed sides? Why would we GM the game? Was a whole part of that thought process of we wanted to keep it fast. We wanted to remove analysis paralysis. We kept the scale small, and we wanted, Dan and I went back and forth a lot about, I don't want this to be a game that we're just a paper target, right? Where the players can just roll dice and punch through. There's a true challenge here. You have to make some tactical choices and solve the puzzle, and it's not going to be solved by simply shooting. Your way across the board, right? Yeah. It's not even traditional in that sense. So that was pretty cool.
And then, so what did you guys do the following year?
So the following year, we loved Thunderhawk Down so much. We were like, oh, what do we do? And we hit upon this idea of doing Heart of Darkness, or the Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
Where we built a river table along the long edge. So the river went all the way down 2 tables, and it was jungle terrain. And so they start in this little village doing the napalm Smells Great in the Morning run.
Right.
And then go down in a little pibber all the way down to the other end where they fight to find the last guy, and he turns into a great
comes out.
Yeah.
Played by Marlon Brando.
Right, exactly. And so again, the interesting creative path, right? That began with a conversation about refreshing our jungle terrain.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went, well, what would be 40K-ish about jungle terrain? And we went, oh man, Nurgle's Garden, we got to Nurgle-fy a jungle.
Right.
And so that's kind of where that idea started. And then we went, okay, if we're going to do that, what's the story that goes there? And, we'd been out for a couple of beers and we're driving back, and I'm like, I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm like, it's got to be, Nurgle don't surf.
Yeah.
It's the line from the movie that we're like, here's how we twist this in.
And for those who don't know, from Apocalypse Now, the line is "Charlie don't surf" in reference. And I still have my T-shirt, by the way, which I just wore the other day that you guys gave me for that. So the interesting thing about that was I had a couple friends that I had met at that Adepticon, and you guys had openings. I was going off to something, but I was telling my friends, you should really go play in this. These guys are great. You're going to have a good time. And they were kind of hemming and hawing about it. And finally I cajoled them to go over there and do it. And they came back saying that was the best event ever. Like they had the best time playing in that event. So you guys really nailed it.
That is really awesome. Yeah. And I think
that's our best feedback. I mean, when people really just have such a great time, we're like, that's why we do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, let me ask you a little bit. You kind of touched on it there a moment ago where you said you go out and have a couple beers and then came up with these ideas. Like, what is your guys' process for, well, actually, let me take one step back from that. How do you guys define a game as being narrative?
Yes. So very early in our careers in doing events, Glenn and I sat down, and I know an idea is good if it gets past Glenn.
Okay.
That's, if so we play really good back and forth. So the first question we had was, well, what is narrative? We say we want to play narratively, but what is it? And we came down to three fairly simple things, and they're going to sound incredibly familiar to you, Carl.
Okay.
It's going to be, we want to play the small fight. We're talking about the sergeant with a bolt pistol, killing a great unclean one. That's the level of story we want to talk about.
Yeah, the analogy I often use in our pregame speeches is this is not Operation Overlord. This is not the Battle of D-Day. It is not even the Battle of Dog Green Beach. Mm-hmm. It's that end scene in Saving Private Ryan where they're where a few guys are defending a bridge from an overwhelming force.
And you care about every one of them. Yeah.
Exactly.
That tiny story, because I love GW, but they tell grand, sweeping, planetary, and galaxy-wide stories. We're like diving way deep in the lore to that tiny spot.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't track individual bullets at the level of story of the Horus Heresy.
No.
The second thing is we wanted to remember the picture, because so much of what we cared about in gaming was our models on really cool terrain. We wanted to get that picture of the epic fight that you see on the cover of the book.
Okay.
The photographs inside codexes were what inspired us to play in the first place. We wanted to figure out how to make our games look like that.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the last one was terrain. We wanted the terrain to be as interesting as the armies and be as different as the armies. So that really that third army on the table concept was taken to. We never wanted our terrain, somebody walk up terrain and say, well, they just threw some stuff onto a table. We wanted to have theme. We wanted to have purpose. We wanted to feel like a real place.
Okay.
And the idea that an objective is an actual bunker, not just a poker chip or a marker that you lay down.
Gotcha.
We wanted to take a little bit past what the rules we're using as, the stock rules that we had in the game in 5th and 6th and 7th and even now 8th edition. Those objectives are great for when you need some abstraction. We wanted to put the abstract to the real with our terrain. And so that meant cool opportunities to build neat things if you're going to fight over a void rocket, we're going to build one and put it on the table.
Gotcha. They actually talk at certain points. I would swear, even in 5th edition, there was discussion around how a building could be an objective, or you could. They were trying to, I think, instill upon you what you just said, right?
Yeah.
So that's really fascinating. And when you guys play like a standard game, which I use the term quotes and standard, what I mean is when the two of you or a bunch of you get together to play for a day or a weekend or whatever, are you playing something pre-planned, or are you just sitting down and playing a game of 40K, or how do you guys, what does your typical game look like?
I think the answer is yes.
And actually, I want to roll back in and add one fourth thing. My kind of fourth thing to Dan's points are why we are fighting is that final narrative piece.
Yeah.
Give the framework and the story about what this fight is about, and that's that final thing into story linkage.
Agreed.
And that's where, when we sit down to play, I mean, I would say that as often as not, we're testing and playing around and being goofy, and we're bringing our armies and playing. But then I'll get a funky idea and be like, "Hey Pat, can we get together? I want to play against your Tau with my Death Guard, and let's do this idea that I read about online."
Cool.
And we'll take a mission and match it with a story, and then kind of plug those three things together in a pre-planned, so that we know, hey, bring these type of forces, because this is going to be a mission where I'm on the defense and you're going to be cracking my lines.
Right. Yeah, I tend to find those to be just like more satisfying. Like there's a visceral like level where I get more engaged with the game when I know there's some story, rather than I'm capturing the most objectives on the table, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, like those are fun games too. It takes it to this other level for me. And so then, so let's talk a little bit about your guys' process. Where else have you done events?
So we started at War Games Con in Austin.
Okay.
We live in Dallas, and War Games Con in Austin was about 3 hours away. So that was kind of our home show for a while. And then Reese and the guys from Frontline Gaming, who were just amazing and awesome, asked us to come out and do the narrative at LVO.
Right.
So we did that for a couple of years, and then the drive just wore on us. It was just too much vacation time to take.
Yeah.
And then we've done Adepticon, Dallas Open. We're going to do Bowls Open this year. Plus, we have always done a charity event in the fall here in Dallas.
Okay.
And we've done a couple of friendly local store events as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your process for coming up for ideas. How, other than beer, how does that work for you guys?
There's also bourbon involved.
Okay, fair.
Bourbon and beer, but no, other than those are when questions get to ideation. But we're high functioning geeks in general. So whether it's other hobbies like in sci-fi and role playing and wargaming and other factions, or computer gaming or board gaming mechanics, we'll often get something that sparks an interest in one of us. And we'll chase it down as wouldn't it be cool if?
Okay.
And then once we kind of get a wouldn't it be cool if, we start batting that around and seeing if anybody else thinks it's cool. I mean, that's the first part. Because some of us, we have stuff that just one of us is involved in. And then the other is like, yeah, that's cool, you should do that. As opposed to, oh my God, we should totally all do that.
Yeah, Pat, like Pat and Phil totally are into skirmish level, and they want to roll that into narrative events. And we're like, totally awesome. What's your ideas?
Right. I mean, it'd be cool. That's how can we support you in a way to do this with this, Necromunda thing that you want to talk about.
Right.
Some of them, we go through that next thing is, okay, we have to, for lack of a better term, is we have to check our own bullshit. And that is this possible and fun? Is what we think fun? Does anybody else think it's fun?
Sure.
Yes.
For instance, and then we go to the practical level. Like, I've heard so many of our event attendees, guests, and friends of mine in 40K that love, for instance, the whole transverse fight. They want a Battlefleet Gothic game that goes to an Aeronautica game that comes to an Apocalypse game that gets down to a kill team and then hovers over to a 40K. And I'm like, that's really cool. But that's really hard and impractical to pull off. You have no idea what the logistics.
Yeah, there is no way to do something like that at an event. I mean, you know, right. I agree with you. I mean, like, I love the idea of a massive campaign where you're managing resources and, you know, doing, like, I love conceptually, love it. The reality of pulling it off, slim.
Right.
Not everybody, even in my group, is as interested in doing that as I am.
Yeah, you know us. It's like, you know, it's that, you know, that twins on a different coast, because we have, and that's the thing, is we also have to focus on what's our Garage Hammer version versus our event stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There's stuff we can do at home, campaign wise, let's say, that we can't really pull off in a 2-day, 3-day event. So that's the practical end of things, at least.
Yeah, I think so. For me, the way I approach it, and kind of where we approach it when we think about an event, is from two angles. One, I think about missions when we are designing a table.
Okay.
So when we were designing the trench table, for instance, I was like, okay, so we know it's going to be trenches, but how am I going to write a mission for trenches?
Right.
There has to be objectives in the terrain that are going to be mission specific objectives. So there's a big gun, there's a bunker, there's gun emplacements, there's a supply depot. So you kind of put those things in, and they become fodder for ideas once you get to the point where you actually have to write a mission for a table. Now, how you get to that point is we reach out to our players before, and we find out what army and faction they're playing. Because we always do is we always line up good guys and bad guys. You're not going to be playing a mixed Space Marine and Tyranid force versus
we can help it.
A Tau and Chaos force.
Yeah, that doesn't feel healthy to me.
No.
Yeah, it was a big jump off a cliff moment when we finally figured that out. Say, okay, look, we're going to go for faction purity, and we're going to see where it lands. And we've been very fortunate. I would say right now, like, our biggest bugbear to that problem is actually just the chaos of game day. Like, when people have for whatever reason can't show up, and then all of a sudden we're calling an audible. But other than that, we work really hard, as Dan said beforehand, to get things in a shape where the players can rely on the stuff they read in the books.
Yeah, I have noticed that does tend to be an issue, especially when you want to run a game with multiple people on each side, and then somebody couldn't make it, or people don't have that army, or I ran a campaign here that was specifically Tyranids versus everybody else, and so it was like, okay, which one of who of us are Tyranid players? Now it's been expanded since that point that we have the Gene Stealer cult, so that would have been a great addition to it. But I found that campaign to be very limited in that sense, but boy, was it thematic.
Yeah, we were fortunately, we have 3 Daves that all play Tyranids, so we had Hive Fleet Dave fight one day. It was really great.
Nice.
The truth.
But the other thing we reach out is we kind of dig a little deeper. We find out what their Hive Fleet is, what their commander is,
right,
what their commander's like. And if they return with a commander, what we'll do is we'll dig them what we did last year or the last event with their commander, and we'll just move that story forward, maybe with a different bad guy.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that was another interesting thing when we talk about narrative is ongoing storytelling and how the challenge of that can be because of our event schedules and the distances between them. I mean, not just mostly in time, not space, right?
Right.
Are we going to come back a year later and are we going to get the same things? I mean, we've got players that, for instance, they want to try out a new army. So we don't have that Ultramarine player anymore. Now he's playing Imperial Guard. Oh, okay. I guess we haven't come. So we decided that keeping the story within the event was probably our best way, but we have some legacy stuff that we draw on for the lore and the fiction that sets the scene.
Okay.
And so it's that key. I'm gonna use the opportunity to go on my rant about lore is important, fiction is important. Fluff is a word I hate in the hobby.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
It doesn't matter.
I don't call it fluff. I call it lore because fluff feels
like
you're not taking it very seriously.
Exactly.
Right.
And so that's it. So when we establish a little bit of fiction and some lore in here, hey, we want to try and use it to our advantage and use it to the player's, comfort level.
And are you guys in the games that you are playing? Are you playing in a consistent sector or universe or whatever? You just whatever changes your mind, so you don't have like a growing thing.
But it comes from the players, because you may have a player bring an army with a background that's in a whole different sector, and you don't want to translate their current story. You want to add it into it and move it along.
Gotcha. Okay. So you talked about, and you did this during Charlie Don't Surf, and your events at your games at events are almost always GM'd, in the sense that it's not. And for people who haven't played role-playing games, that's a very hard concept, I think, for people to understand. Where, and we talk about this in the show, but in a game like Dungeons and Dragons, the game master controls everything except the players, and it's not meant to be entirely adversarial. If it were, the GM would win every time, right? It's absolutely about creating a story and providing entertainment that is challenging and not guaranteed. You're not guaranteed a success, but the idea there is that it's challenging you to think and do those things. And it sounds like all of your events, you use GMs there, but what about your home events? Do you guys typically have a GM or not, or you're co-GMing, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. So,
yes.
Yeah. So we will, if we have something we want to try out as a GM, maybe we'll grab a couple other narrative guys or a couple local guys and do it. But most of the time, what we end up doing is we'll solo GM it. So, like, I'll play my Imperial Fist against Glenn's Nurgle, and what I will say is like, okay, I'm going to play the bad guys in this fight. So we're going to move your story forward.
Right.
And therefore I will GM and kind of tell you what, kind of happens in the fight. And then maybe next time it's,
And when it comes to event level, like public games, one of the we use the term GM because it's something that's relatively familiar, but we often in our pregame speech we say, we are your fun concierge. We're here to make sure you guys are having a good time and exploiting your best ideas, and not to set rule boundaries and solve disputes in the game. I mean, it's the, hey, what happens next once you flip the switch on the Void Missile and it launches? We're going to tell you the battle that happens next.
And I think that's the thing you can do with games with GMs that you can't do in a versus game, where you can have like a sequence of events that the players do not know what's going to happen when you flip that switch, right?
Yes. Yes, it allows you to play with limited information in the game.
Right.
You don't know what the opponent's objective is, for instance.
So one of the things that we do in our missions is, because we have serialized missions, you'll play the same people 3 times, is we try to make in that second mission, there's some twist.
Interesting.
The distress signal was a fake. That sort of thing.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, that's so cool.
Challenge their knowledge. Exactly it.
Yeah. So then, I have one last question. Then we're kind of running short on time here. But what? Sure. So now I see. I've been following you guys on Facebook, and I've been watching you guys build this trench terrain, which just looks amazing. Like, you guys are doing an incredible job on this stuff, to the point where I'm gonna try to squeeze in to your game. I didn't sign up for it, but I'm gonna try to jump in at some point.
We'll figure it out, man. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, we know some guys.
Well, okay, good.
Yeah, we know.
What I wanted to ask is, so then what happens to this terrain after the event? Because this is a significant amount of storage that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, about that. So there was a time in our lives where we were stuffing it in closets and so forth, and that got us to about 18 tables.
Literally,
wow.
The trench tables are sitting in 2 tubs behind my desk at this moment. I can touch it from here, and it's currently what we refer to as my storage problem.
Exactly. That's the way we fight.
And how can I make my storage problem our storage problem?
Yep. So we got to a point where we cannot grow or do any more terrain projects, and we're obviously going to do that because I'm obsessive. So whatever. So I eventually talked my wife, who is a wonderful human being and way above my station, into, if we got a storage unit that was climate controlled, you could store some of your scrapbooking and school stuff and some decoration stuff in there, and I could use the other side, which ended up being 2/3 of the storage unit for terrain stuff.
As you do.
Yeah.
And so we have this bank, of a table inventory, and all these awesome fat mats, and we go, okay, what is our creativity driving us to? We also look critically back at our previous work and go, oh, we need to retire that table. It's not up to standard anymore, or it's falling apart, or it's damaged. And so we're kind of in this cycle of, we've got an inventory that supports the size of event we want to support. And we just kind of slowly work in and work out.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
The new downtown table, for instance, that Dan is working on, is the replacement for the old downtown we created back in 2015.
Gotcha.
Which eventually, was great and fun, but eventually we realized some of our design errors. We've become much better at modular storage, about not trashing our terrain, putting it up and taking it down. And so these are like iterative lessons we've learned in I guess now this will be our 5th year doing this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty good idea, especially if if I can get several friends to go in on a storage area. It's not a bad idea.
So one of the keys is climate controlled, because a lesson learned is you can't use certain types of glue, like hot glue, which is amazingly effective, if you don't keep it between a certain temperature.
Oh yeah, it'll basically remelt.
Yeah, exactly. So we have 20 feet of wall that we used in our first event, which was amazing. It was the greatest game experience I think I've ever seen, because we had it was 10 people on a side attacking each other over this wall. It was great.
Over and through the breaches of a 20-foot long, 1 foot wide, and 1 foot high wall.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was the best spectacle. One of the best spectacles I think we've ever done. But that table is currently in my garage, and we are scalping off the foam to use as scrap, because all the hot glue melted and the foam worked.
Oh no!
Yeah, we here in Texas with 100+ degree summers and then add that to Dan's attic.
Yeah,
and it became a bit of a travesty. We went, oh, that was a bad idea.
That's sad.
Yeah, that was a lot of work.
That's sad. Well, guys, what do you have coming up other than Adepticon that I can have you pitch out there, and then we'll wrap it up?
Sure. So we have Adepticon coming up on March 26th, and that's going to be a super fun show. And if you guys are there, just come by and say hi, even if we do get plays, because we'd love to meet more people. Then we have the Dallas Open GT on May 1st,
okay,
and then we have Bowls Open on June 12th. Wow. And the Bowls folks are.
And are you gonna? Do you think you're running the same thing at these 3 events?
So if we have, can we steal 5 minutes?
Yeah, go ahead.
I got a pitch.
Tell them about CPX.
Okay, so at Adepticon, we're running the Iron Cage, which is another curated event. The short format, fun play. We'll at the Dallas Open, we will have one of what we call our standard 2-day narrative event with teams fighting each other.
Right.
Same thing at Bowls Open, but we're also going to be redeploying our Command Post Exercise 2.0. Our Command Post Exercise was a experiment that I kind of pioneered and convinced the guys to follow me down a rabbit hole, where we had 2 command teams in the separate command rooms of a commander and a radio operator, operating phones and laptop computers to communicate with players in a separate room on 3 different tables.
That's amazing.
So they were receiving orders over SMS text message. They had maps with map coordinates. We're calling in artillery and pulling in reserves and trying to figure out just what the hell the other team was doing. It was fast and frantic. It was kill team level, but slightly bigger.
Yeah.
And I violated a few of the kill team rules at the time with some, we threw in some dreadnoughts and rhinos and whatnot. But anyway, it was fantastic and fun. And then we do a military style pre-briefing for each team. They have a time to plan. They then execute their plan. We then bring them back. We do an after action report. We analyze their communications, show them the friction that real fighting has, where you don't know what's going on and how your communication can trigger other actions on other tables.
Right.
And we give them a whole AAR, and then we do it all over again. So we usually do like a 2-mission format, train them the whole way. We're going to do this at Bowls because they offered us this amazing room. It's a teaching theater basically.
Oh, cool.
So it kind of has the feel of of the movie War Games.
Yeah.
And so we're going to set up we're going to have a much larger set of command structure and a much larger command battle groups in a number of players at least. And so that's going to be, it's a lot of fun. It's a high pace, limited information game that really tests not just your ability to roll dice and move dudes and know your 40K rules, but also to make good decisions and communicate effectively and plan as a team.
Oh, I love this. This could, it's a bit like, I'm picturing a bit like also for the commanders, a bit like Battleship, right? Where you can't see like what maybe you're calling an artillery strike. Great. I'm going to put it in this location, and you don't know if you've got allies that have now moved into that area.
And then somebody moves a dreadnought up there and gets ringed by artillery fire. It was hilarious.
Oh, that's incredible.
Totally friendly fire isn't.
I cannot tell you how fun that sounds.
Yeah, this was inspired by the National Training Center and how they war game, but especially I really wanted to get people into the idea of fog of war, right? Because I mean, when 40K we have all this information, so that's CPX. So the 2.0 stuff. Watch the channel. We'll start to leak out some information and talk about format. So,
well, cool. I'm very excited. So, if people want to see more about what you guys are doing, where should they go?
Our Facebook page is our primary way to get a hold of us in anything. So it's the Narrative Guys. On Facebook.
I'll create a link in the show notes.
Yeah, you can go to both the Facebook link, and if you go to thenarrativeguys.com, it'll forward you the Facebook link. So.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, I'll include that link in our show notes then, man.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Carl.
No, thank you guys. I really appreciate you. You've given me some ideas here, and man, I am very excited to see what you guys do with that Bulls thing. Please do film some of that so we can see what it looks like.
Will do.
All right.
Will do, sir.
Talk to you guys at Adepticon.
We'll see you in March. All right, man.
Hey, see you, Carl.
All right, we're back. So I want to talk a little bit about taking narrative to kind of the next level. And in the true sense of role playing, there's a lot of things that you can do here that I find to just be really, really fun. You heard in the interview with the Narrative Guys the idea where they were having commanders of forces outside of the room receiving text messages and trying to, decide what was going on in the tables and where to place artillery strikes and that kind of thing, and hitting their own units and all that. And I mean, that kind of thing really, really, I love. I love being embedded in things. I was thinking about running a Call of Cthulhu game one time where the players, I have a regular room that I play in, where the players would play detectives. It was going to take place in San Francisco, and they were trying to catch a murderer. Right. But I wanted to set up the room to be basically like a detective station. Like you had your board here that had, the suspects on it. Right. And you had maybe, phones on each table and all these things so that you were in the detective squad trying to, because a lot of the action of the game was going to take place within that environment. Right. So if they're discussing where does the investigation go next, they're in that kind of mindset.
Escape room meets D&D adventure.
Kind of. Yeah. And so one of the ideas I like is this idea of a commander narrative where each player is the actual commander of their force. A lot of times we see that and we're like, oh, well, Armin's my HQ, so he's going to go here. Or Magnus is there and he's going to go there. But what if instead of that, you actually are the commander? So you're maybe not putting Armin out there because
you're not putting any HQ out there.
Or maybe any HQ.
I'm a big fan of that one.
Right. And you're dictating the way the game goes because you are communicating down to your forces, hey, do this, do that. But you're taking more of a personal interest. And you may even introduce rules where you can personally take wounds or something along those lines.
Love that stuff.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that GW talks about. You are the commander of your forces.
But it's hard to say you're the commander when Magnus, the primary,
I know.
the demon primarch of the Thousand Suns is standing right there on the table.
But then you can also put in some fog of war stuff or put in some of the elements of the commander. Okay, so I have this commander to that unit. In order for that unit to do what I want the unit to do this. Yeah. So I roll a D20, and if I don't get at least a 15, they don't do it.
Yeah, that's. I mean,
or
that's
they go in a different direction.
That's possible
right?
too.
You know,
but I'm talking more about like personally investing yourself in that game. I mean, regardless of what mechanics you use there.
And you're not talking about literally wounding somebody. You're talking about
But the idea sorry, you took a wound. Come over here. I'm going to stab you with these scissors.
I know.
No, but
whoa.
But yeah, I don't want to play in that game honestly. But you know, it could be really, really enjoyable to really feel like you are more invested in what is going on the table.
And a map campaign accompanying this, not to switch gears and jump ahead, but then thinking, okay, well, if I'm commanding my forces, what is my personal objective for this force? So it's not about winning. It's what am I trying to achieve? What is it that my forces are doing? You know, well, they're trying to win. Why?
What's the conflict that's going on?
Right. What is it in you as the commander? To some degree, I have this little note here, and I'm not trying to poo-poo on this. It's just, this is narrative on easy mode. Embracing that you are the commander of your army and that you are making decisions based on an entire battle group rather than just what's on this table right this second.
Right.
It's a very natural starting spot. And that's what I mean by easy mode. It's a great way to start because it's the smallest jump.
Yeah. And one of the points I brought up in the narrative gaming group interview with those guys from the narrative guys was the other thing about finding one other person that wants to do what you want to do is my idea of fun may not also be the same idea as your idea of fun. Like, I really like the idea of, yes, me being the commander, I have resources that I can apply to certain battles, but in order to achieve this grander objective, I can't just dump all my resources in this one battle zone because I have, you know, other complications that are involved. So, I mean, I love the idea of this. I don't know how it would actually play out in.
Yeah, we did it. We did an event where you had an order of battle, and so you had a bunch of units available to you.
Mm-hmm.
But if the unit got killed off,
it's gone.
You could roll a die, and it could end up being gone.
Yeah.
And now for the next mission, where you know you need to do X, Y, Z. Oh no! You use that unit.
Yeah, and I think I
that.
love that kind of stuff where it's now you're not only playing the battle going on, but you're thinking on a
bigger picture,
wider, bigger picture scale.
Right. And there's certain codexes that lend themselves really well to this, where there's a clear hierarchy of command.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have, you know, if you, Carl, are Supreme, you know, Black Legion Overlord Tutulus, you know, and Adon, you are Preacher Tejada. I don't know. We'll find some arch confessor or whatever it may be, you know, and I am embodying Brog Gitgrind as I often do as a war boss, but I have that model. I can play that guy on the table.
Right.
But I also have a chain of lesser characters or other HQ options that I could be fielding.
Right.
That are, again, exactly as you said.
They're my lieutenants.
My distribution of force. And I'm going to send them out. And, you know, you could just build in a core. If your HQ that is you dies, well, that's where our narrative ends.
Yeah.
And you didn't achieve your goal.
Yeah.
Right,
you know that ends that story that we're telling. So
but Abaddon, to your point, is not at every battle. So why would I be at every battle?
And
I have lieutenants to go out there and do my fighting for me.
And you don't get to be Abaddon because you're not Abaddon.
But you know what I'm saying.
I know 100% what you're saying. Like,
well,
but even me myself, I could not be at every battle.
Right. You just can't do it.
Or there's a disadvantage if a certain model dies. I mean, in the book Celestine, it starts off with this unit of sisters who are on a planet, and their canoness has died. And so the sister superior of the Celestine unit is now in charge. And it talks about the conflicts she's having and the limitations she feels and those kinds of things. And are they going to have faith in me? And you can actually play that out on the table. You can make rules for that, right? If your primary leader dies, you have somebody who's designated, but like I was saying, you know, there's a percentage chance that they won't do the right thing, or their units won't do it for them.
But that wouldn't be optimal then, Adon.
Exactly. But it would tell a hell of a story.
Amen.
I do like this idea of like a larger series of forces that you have resources you're pulling from. My only concern around something that broad of scope was a long time ago in Dragon Magazine, which was the supporting magazine for Dungeons and Dragons. I remember BattleTech was big at the time, and these guys had outlined this whole campaign they were playing for BattleTech, where they had these huge maps of the galaxy, and they were taking over planets, and they had resources they could allocate to each planet, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And then like 6 months later, they were there was like a follow-up article, and they were like, "So how's that BattleTech campaign going?" They're like, "Yeah, that thing died. Like it was way too complicated."
Well,
and that's the risk you run with some of these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I have it somewhere in here because we've talked about it on other episodes. Is you have to have a defined ending.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to say we're doing a series of 3 battles or 5 battles or
10.
whatever, or you set it up so that the goals are such that you're going to be able to accomplish them within a couple of games or whatever.
The tighter that is, the more likely it's going to succeed.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it makes it harder
Yeah.
because then you have to come up with another scenario for the next set of narrative games, but it's more likely it's actually going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why Mike and I we would do these 3-game arcs, whether we use battle missions or not. We would say, okay, we're going to do a 3-game arc. And he would, there's another guy named Steven who used to do this as well. And he and Mike would do these 3-game arcs. And it was a great way to kind of, you knew it was going to happen in this timeline. This is the story we're telling with these 3 games, and you're done.
Yeah.
And
I think one of the cautions with that of having that predetermined end, or one of the tips I guess I'd give is, and it's one of the dangers and the cautions of making a commander-centric narrative, is that the commander wants to achieve glory and pursue his ends. Whereas if the narrative beat you're telling, instead of being character-centric, is battlefield conditional-centric.
Yeah.
Matt and I's narrative is about a biologist, Adeptus Biologus, has some kind of secret genetic code. And we've been doing this back and forth as this guy's getting pulled back and forth between our 2 armies. And then when we feel like, okay, we've reached the point in which this guy has been either absorbed by the Genestealer cult, or, the Imperium was able to save him and get the secret, sauce to nuke all the Genestealer Gribblies.
right.
That will end. It's not about the characters, it's about the battlefield condition.
Right.
I would really encourage people that in terms of shaping a narrative event, think about, what's the campaign's narrative? What are the goals of the campaign rather than what are the goals of the characters? And that's why I say, like, the character one's a great starting spot, but it's much harder to tell a satisfying beginning, middle, and end of a character, especially if you're embodying that character, than it is to say, for this campaign, for this war zone, this is our objective. The last G3 one we did, there was an element of Titan technology that was buried on this planet, and all the factions were the Imperial factions were trying to get that, and the Orcs just wanted a good crump, right? They just wanted to get out there and bash faces.
Yeah.
And then the Orcs were simultaneously trying to establish who's dominant.
Right.
And it was, that was the melee of war, of the war zone. And that's one of the dangers of character-centric or personality-centric versus war zone-centric. And I really encourage people to start moving more as a way to start thinking about this, is move more towards war zone-centric narratives and map-centric narratives.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had one where everybody created their own custom Inquisitor and their own custom Inquisition warband.
I remember this. Yeah.
And one of the
It was
things
your
we
Inquisitor
did was
War.
Inquisitor Wars. Yeah. Inquisition Wars.
Inquisition Wars. Not a great book, by the way.
And actually, there's somebody in the community, they've done, I think it's Jason Motive. Anyway, sorry. They're doing an Inquisition Wars thing as well. But one of the scenarios we did was these 2 forces fought, and there was a rule for how to take the Inquisitor hostage.
I remember you saying
And if you took the Inquisitor hostage, then the next game was a large game where you were trying to rescue the Inquisitor. And in order to rescue the Inquisitor, you had to enter the complex, and then you were in a Zone Mortalis, and you had to go through the Zone Mortalis to capture the Inquisitor.
Yeah.
Right? And so, we were kind of forcing people into the narrative, but they were buying into the fact that, yes, we're doing this campaign.
Right.
And it was great. It told a really cool story, and this guy's Inquisitor got captured, and he was really upset about it, and he's like, I gotta go get that guy, and he really focused on rescuing him. It was really cool, and it's just a matter of kind of thinking out how can we play this out, and it was kind of character centric, but not really, right? I mean, the goal was just rescuing this guy. He wasn't.
Now, were you
doing
actually
anything.
playing in this, or were you just running this?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
I played it in as well. We had, because we had one game where it was kind of combat patrol size, and we had vehicles that moved on their own, and we had non-combatant guys you had to play around with, and yeah.
So the interesting thing about let's talk a little bit about running with a game master.
Yes.
Because one of the things you have done in various events that you've run, whether they're apocalypse events or other things, is you've kind of taken on that role of a game master. And this offers you some unique ways to play. So for example, the game master is going to set the story for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's better if everybody buys into it, but yeah.
Sure, everybody's going to buy into it, but you can work within this framework to kind of create a story. And the great thing about creating that kind of story is the players don't know what to expect to a degree.
Right.
When you walk up to a table in competitive play or just normal thematic play, you kind of know what to expect right away. A GM can actually help you from the list building point to the story building point. Like, you know what? It's going to be inappropriate for you to bring this kind of units to this fight.
Right.
Although you have no understanding of why that is, or maybe the GM tells you a little bit about, well, you know, you're going to be doing a lot of interior fighting. You're not going to need any tanks, you know.
Or you could set it up front where you say, hey, we're going to use the spearhead attacker defender force orgs.
Sure. My point being the GM is going to set that for both players, right? They also, you benefit from having a GM there because they can mediate the rules for you, right?
Yeah.
And this can even deviate from what the rules in the book say.
Right, especially then. That's really when the rules mediator is going to come in, is if you're going to do something like, Adon, you mentioned earlier, the 0G where we had tanks floating around from flight decks to flight decks, which was super fun.
Yeah.
But you're going to need somebody there to mediate you've added something new, and having somebody there really takes a lot of it increases the trust that people trust that somebody's here to make a fair determination.
It increases the anxiety.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say about that, though, is from my years of role-playing experience, the one thing you want to do is remain consistent. So if I give you one rule for having your tank fly from one landing zone to another, I'm going to use that same level of rule for somebody else too.
Right.
Another thing a mediator of rules allows for is a fog of war element.
Yeah.
And this kind of gets into our next thing of that you could have either non-combatants or environmental forces on the table.
For sure.
And it allows for the game master then can take control of these third-party elements. I always think of it's a board game that's a hoot called Small World.
Yep.
And when the game starts, you get to play out these weird fantasy races that come into power and then decline and go away. But when the game starts, there's these remnants of civilizations just wandering around, and they're really easy to wipe out, and you use them kind of as springboards to get the game rolling. But I always loved that idea of that there's just this thing lurking in the corner. I remember I showed up one day late to a game, and my two buddies were playing. I was like, hey, I just painted up this Gene Stealer, and I was like trying out this color scheme. I was like, what do you guys think? And they're like, this. I was like, I'm gonna hang out and watch. And they're like, well, have the Gene Stealer be in the game. I'm like, okay, cool. And so I wrote down some stuff, and I was like, all right, I got this chart, and I'm going to roll on it when certain things happen. They're like, cool. And we just added, and I wasn't really even GMing it, but it was that same sort of idea.
But suddenly they don't know what to expect. Now there's another element you have to deal with.
Right.
And it becomes very difficult if you are playing, you cannot do this in a game where it's just like a thematic or competitive game.
No. This is not a match play thing.
No, there's no way this can happen because all of a sudden you're introducing some element. Well, I hadn't planned on that. Right. That's the whole point.
The whole thing. Right. Yeah.
Whether it's having somebody come in as another army all of a sudden with limited forces, or, you know, hey, we've been trying to capture this guy the whole time. Well, here comes the Eldar, and they snatch this guy up at this point.
Right.
And let's see if you can stop them before they take off with the guy, which is going to lead to a whole new thing or not. Right. Based on what happens.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I mean, you have two people playing in a scenario, and as you're saying, you as the GM, you come over and say, okay, this small force of Eldar have now landed on this planet, and you've got Imperium versus Chaos, and they're like, Eldar? Yeah, because they realize that thing is very valuable to them, and they don't want you destroying it. So you have to prevent them from getting it.
Right.
On top of whatever else you were already doing on the table.
Right. Or the amble.
The amble,
Amble's a good example.
Amble's is way out there.
Yeah. So I think there's huge opportunity for this. And it takes a certain type of person to be a GM. And you got to understand, too, you can be as involved or not involved, but letting it kind of play out a bit and jumping in where appropriate, or or dictating certain things. The other great thing about a GM is you can have, I think environmental effects and that kind of thing. But also, what about, hey, there's hidden things on the board that the players don't know about.
Right.
And I know if they cross over any of these areas, well, that's a minefield you didn't know about. Or, hey, there's a treasure trove of useful stuff you didn't have here that gains you some kind of benefit.
Yeah.
That you may not even see. Like, there may not be, or maybe I put out a bunch of markers and some of them are completely nothing. I'm just messing with you.
It allows, with the GM can also make things really nimble, right? So if you got a couple of games going and let's say somebody's airplane crashes.
Yeah.
You say, oh, everybody, there was an airplane crash. Guess what? Now this and this and this are happening. Now this thing is on fire. This whole forest is on fire. You weren't planning on it, but it just gives you a good idea.
Right.
Right.
Or, by the way, the pilot of that plane is one of your ace pilots. And if you're able to rescue him now,
right,
you gain some advantage later.
Yeah.
We had an element like this in one of our last big events when we were doing the G3 stuff way back when, there was a massive artillery system, and it was on a different table. And as control shifted from it, we'd walk and go hand somebody the APOC blast template and go, here, and then be what? And I'm like, you just got artillery support, put it down.
We did the same thing.
And it's like, oh my God, that's so awesome. And that's, the GM would have to be, you can't do that, without a GM in play to balance those timing issues. Carl, you were just talking about like environmental effects, and I just got the idea of like, wouldn't it be cool to do a trench warfare game, which is one of those like holy grail kind of setups in the first place? Yeah. But then the No Man's,
by the way, narrative guys,
right?
Yeah. For Adepticon.
I know, I saw it.
It's incredible,
fantastic. What if the No Man's Land, because it's such a long-standing trench warfare, the No Man's Land, you could have the GMs would know, oh, this particular section has mines in it. This one is mud. And when you get down into this trench line, it's got this kind of gas in it, and you wouldn't know. And like, how much cooler that would be, that fog of war, that unknown for the environment. Like, that kind of stuff would just be so
neat. One of the ways you could execute on that is you set up the table with the terrain, you being the GM, you take photos of that, then draw on your, little maps. Mm-hmm. Okay, I've got this here, I've got that here, I've got there here. You're not showing the players that. As the players' play begins, I've run out here. Okay, well, that's mud. So actually, you find yourself getting stuck in it,
right? And
you can only move at half movement rate,
right?
At that point, and they're like, but I didn't know that. Well, you know it now.
Yeah. So what you gonna do?
Continue your move, please.
Yeah. And even in the games where I didn't get to play at all, you can still have a really good time as a GM, just enjoying to see how the things play out, and you kind of go, "Oh, I didn't expect that."
And that's what I was saying. Like, it takes a certain type. Like, as a GM of role playing games, like I don't typically get to play a character. I'm playing kind of all the other characters,
right?
But I'm also playing characters, the monsters and stuff. They're there to lose. Like, they're not there to kill the party. They're there to provide a challenge.
Well, depending on the GM.
Yeah, if you play with Lars. But in general, you're there to challenge them and provide them entertainment, right? And so you have to be somebody that enjoys entertaining.
So going back to your idea about like the trench warfare and having the minefields and the mud, this kind of can go into like special effects, right? There's things you could do.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about extreme gaming.
Yep.
Right? You could have things where they go into something and all of a sudden the light turns on or fog comes rolling out. I have this little tiny fog machine thing that's really cool for pumping out fog and
play the sounds of explosions.
Oh,
through
yeah.
Your thing. You remember we were playing your copy of Escape from Colditz?
Yeah.
And then we got out. So it's a game where you're trying to escape a World War II camp, prison camp. And we got out. And then Doug started playing that alarm noise and came over and started shining the light on the table like it was a spotlight. We were laughing, but it was hugely immersive. You were like,
really
cool. That was cool.
Yeah, and you can. There's so many things out there with iMovies and special effects apps, and
for sure,
even videos that other people already made that you can use to set a scene, to create an effect, to spur on the game. Just something simple like you were saying. Like the buttons you have on your Roadcaster here, right?
No, not gonna push it.
Don't push one. And you haven't labeled them yet.
No.
But you could have sounds ready to go.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Like those guys run out into the thing and you start playing explosion sounds. Oh, guys, you just went into a minefield.
Right? How awesome
Now,
would that be?
You could blow up the board, but that would mess up their models. But that was my first thought, actually, was you could have little things pop off.
And you don't have to have
Start throwing firecrackers down the board.
you don't have to be doing a massive event again for these. I mean, it's when you are doing a big event, you should be doing this stuff, frankly.
That'd be awesome.
Like you need to have some of this in play. One of the simplest things is you can take just Google Map images, save them off as JPEGs, as screenshots, and then drop in arrows and glyphs and things for force distributions that look like military maps.
Yeah, for sure.
That's an easy one to do. But another thing is, so Matt and I sometimes play Blitz Bowl, and when we're doing that,
and you guys are crushing it, I have to say.
we do play some Blitz Bowl. And when we nice, that was I actually didn't catch it at first. In the background, Chris, one of our local guys, made a fantasy football background playlist.
Yeah.
And it's just people cheering and then like it's
Booing
swords
and-
clashing and like it's sports noise is layered in with gladiatorial combat. And we just put it on in the background when we're playing. And I notice now when it's not there.
Well, the episode that Dunsmore and I did,
Yeah.
where we did the intro, we used, I just used a YouTube thing of,
I think it's Chris's.
of stadium
Sounds.
noises.
Yeah.
Well, I just found online too on YouTube there are battle sounds like 440K specifically, and they run for hours. And it's just the sounds of combat. There's one like for Necrons, and you have like different like technology sounding like things, Necrons versus other, and there's explosions, planes, all
And
that stuff.
you can put different types of sounds in different phases, right?
Yeah,
like
for
if it's
sure.
a psychic phase, you could have this real trippy kind of etheric sound stuff, and during the shooting phase, you're using all the shooting sounds, and
Which
I mean,
I think brings up a point. Sorry to jump in there, but I think that brings up a point of something else that a GM can do is you can be signifying, hey, you need to be at this point. Hey, if it's an event, keeping people
moving,
keeping things
so
moving.
you start
keeping
hearing a
things-
bunch of gunfire. Oh, look at that! It's the shooting phase.
I didn't finish moving. It's too bad you're getting shot at. And I mean,
but you can drive things forward faster.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get really extreme about it, you can actually have Nerf guns and start firing them at people. I mean, we're talking extreme, right? I mean, there's things that you can do, like the lights all of a sudden flicker, and then you start firing a bunch of Nerf guns at people. Oh my God! Oh, it must be the shooting phase.
I love it.
We're talking about extreme gaming, right?
Yeah.
So some of the things too I've seen, since we're already kind of leaping into this like use of technology and stuff, and I was going to have Pete Dunn on to talk. I haven't had a chance to schedule with him, unfortunately, but we jokingly call him Perfect Pete because he's a good looking dude. He's got a beautiful, girlfriend. He's in shape. He's smart. Like everything's right.
have him
all
on
the
the show.
rules.
He runs 30K events. I think every summer. And these things are incredible. Jason Mullins was telling me about it, where they're off in a location they found. It's off in the woods somewhere, but it's like a cabins and that kind of thing that they're playing in. But as he gives the briefing, and this is all Horus Heresy Gaming, and as he's giving the briefing, he has not only does he have audio visual stuff, because that's the area he works in, so he'll create like animated presentations that are showing like combat and all that. But then he goes around and everybody gets their orders on. He bought a bunch of Kindles and he's loaded all the orders, and those are your data slates.
Yeah.
And so you have the Kindles as data slates. And then as the games are playing, he's taking pictures and stuff throughout the day of the armies and everything, and he incorporates those after the breaks into the next presentations that are going on.
Yeah.
So it is like really over the top fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, with animations and all this stuff. But,
And
but
you
now but now you find yourself, after the lunch break or whatever, they go through the next briefing and it's like, oh, there's your stuff presented up there for everybody to see what's going on.
a whole nother level of immersion.
Oh, it's incredible.
And it's great. I mean, and you can even take an idea like that, and if you don't have the money to do Kindles for everybody, just about everybody has a smartphone or an iPad or something like that. And what you could say is, hey, I'm sending you your orders via email.
Yep.
Open your email on your phone or your iPad or your laptop, and oh my gosh, I've got my orders. And it's a way to incorporate that kind of an idea on a slightly less expensive scale.
Yeah.
But you can do that, and you can
Or you could honestly put them up on web pages and then send the person the link to their specific web page,
right,
and then they just
you could
pull
do
up
that,
their
or
page.
you can also then in the course of the day, oh, you've just been dispatched new orders. Open your email.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
you're like, oh my gosh.
Orders have been updated.
Right. And you're looking at it, goes, our whole objective has just changed. We need to move all the way over to the other side of the board, and all of a sudden the other guys are going, why are these guys running all over there? Oh, this unit's running. This unit's running. What?
That'd be awesome.
And I mean, with
actually.
cell phones and text messaging or messaging services or Discord or Remind, there's all these different apps that would make that so easy to do.
Yeah.
And again, stuff that a GM's gonna be able to bring to the game and a level of presentation quality and that you just aren't gonna have with just a pickup game. It's narrative
absolutely.
exclusive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course, the next level's cosplay.
And you know what though? It's really cool because if you,
I gotta tell you, I've never been interested in like cosplay stuff, but I have seen some pretty impressive costumes and stuff. I would be fully on showing up dressed up, and it'd have to be comfortable enough to stand in all day.
But I mean, if you go to the Adepticon team tournament,
Oh yeah.
these guys will come up, show up fully geared up.
The Tau Warrior guys.
Yeah, and the Inquisitors and all these different folks.
I got to show up as an Imperial commander.
Oh yeah,
Heck yeah.
And the funny thing is, when people make fun of you when you do stuff like that, you lean into it.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
If you get don't get self-conscious about it. Be like,
But even
I'm
something
dressed up as a commissar,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
somebody makes fun of me. I'm gonna have to execute you now. I'm sorry.
But even something as
Not
simple
sorry.
as when Jeff and those guys wore the shirts and ties, and the Church of Kelly and Sixes Be Upon Him and all that kind of stuff. I mean, they got into it, right? It was
So for what Adon, speaking of, was several years ago, Jeff and Zach and who else?
I don't know. It was two other people.
Tasty Taste and I don't remember who the other person
don't
was.
either.
All dressed up. They had created the Church of Phil Kelly, and they dressed up and were handing out literature.
Right, and all
this
their
stuff.
armies were Phil Kelly
Codexes,
Yeah. And it was, Sixes.
Yeah,
Be
but they
Upon
walked
Him.
around.
Yeah.
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 Apostle.
They looked
And
like
were-
Mormons
they were
on a
into it.
mission.
Yeah.
And you can go full bore, fully dressed as a commissar or sister of battle or whatever. Or you could do something, it could just be more simple. Like I have a pair of, my mom knitted some slippers that look like tanks.
That's perfect.
And, when we played Flames
what
of
was-
War, I would wear my
was-
tank slippers.
I can't remember who it was. There was a girl that would go to DungerCon.
Yeah.
And she'd play Tyranids, and she'd wear like a Tyranid hat.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
She'd wear that Tyranid hat. She was awesome.
Yeah. And, we were playing Flames of War, and I had a early war army was French.
Yeah.
Right? So I had on a little beret and a
perfect.
scarf. And on the table, I had a bottle of wine and a baguette.
That's amazing.
And I'd offer
There
people
you
a glass
go.
of wine when we play. I mean, it doesn't have to be like
Serious.
full-blown orc outfit, but
Right.
that would be cool. But can you stand in that for 8 hours
I
and
don't
play
think
a game?
so.
But there's different ways you can bring the cosplay in. And,
I really
you
like
give
your
people
idea.
extra
I like
points for
that
that.
beret and the
It
wine
was
and the
fun.
that is really funny.
And snacks.
yes. Yeah.
And a way to drown your sorrows when you start rolling ones.
Which was, I was drunk by the end of the day. So.
Nice.
Staying in character for the whole event. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Again, if you go back to you are the commander on the table.
Yeah.
Kind of difficult to do as a Tyranid.
No,
Eat all day.
just hiss at them every time they do anything.
That's true.
Yeah, make a snarling noise and just start stuffing
So
food
it might
in your
not be
face.
appropriate for all scenarios.
I tell you what, something though about playing orcs, because orc players just do have more
right?
fun than
They
everybody
almost
else.
naturally fall into
Yeah.
the
they do.
Cockney and the
Yes.
throaty voice. And
Well,
the,
how
like,
many times in a GW store have you heard them all of a
The
sudden
wog,
yelling
yeah.
the wog, right?
Yeah.
But this is the kind of situation where somebody who's a real experienced GM like Tom or Mike Montes or even Carl, I don't know how many different game systems you know, but like
Lots.
Some folks like Tom, where he knows all the ins and outs of Traveler and everything else.
You
They
see
can-
that up there on the
There you go.
there's small my traveler stuff.
They can help organize appropriate
Yeah.
scenarios and lead into actually role playing your army.
Yeah.
Right. So you do a role playing session where you are a member of that army.
Yeah.
And whatever happens in that role playing session then leads into the game you're going to play.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, this is easily doable with all the Dark Heresy stuff
Yep.
and the Space Marine, Death Watch, and all that.
Right.
I mean, you could absolutely run a game where now all of a sudden your role playing game ties into the narrative game.
And
on
you could
the
even
table.
use Fate or some of the other systems as well. I mean, it's
For
just
sure.
a matter of having a GM who goes in and goes, oh,
creative
what would
enough
be
to
really
do
good
it.
for this?
Yeah.
Mountain Witch or whatever. It's like, what the heck system is that? Don't worry about it. This is how it's going to work. But you can end up with some really cool setups into the game. And then during the game, you're going to automatically be continuing to role play that character.
Yeah.
And have say, well, you know what? This character really hates this, that, and the other. So he would attack those guys.
Yeah.
It may be totally suboptimal for a game of 40K, but that's what that guy would do.
Well, this is where you could have like a really cool RPG where everybody is playing. It would be tricky, but you could do it where everybody's playing like high level commanders.
Right.
Yeah. And you sit down and you have this role playing game, it would be sort of like an RPG, almost like you're right. Tom is like perfect at kind of navigating this thing where you have like, maybe, you're the enemy commander and I'm this commander and you're that commander. And he's throwing these ideas and things at you. And then it's like, okay, now this leads into games,
Right.
I mean, that would be super fun. Like you could really embrace that kind of thing.
Well, kind of like the narrative guys, you're saying they have the guys off in the other room.
Yeah.
They're using text messages or whatever to
Yep.
do it. It reminds me of, we had this team building thing where one person is looking at a Lego structure.
Right.
And they've got to tell somebody else how to build the next thing, and then they tell a second person. And
How
they
hard
go tell
is
the
that?
commander, and the last guy is trying to build the exact same Lego structure.
Nobody got it right.
Nobody got it right, right? And but you could do the same kind of thing where I'm saying, okay, this is the forces on the battlefield, and you can't write anything down, and I tell you, and then you got to run to the other room to tell the actual commander who comes back and gives you orders, and you kind of go, really, the left flank? Okay, and he meant the right flank,
Right.
and I mean, you can really build in some really cool.
Yeah, I think when we see what the
effects.
narrative guys are working on for this next thing, we're going to see a lot of that Fog of War stuff come into play. I'm really excited about that.
We used to do a little bit of this. We had an event where the downtime in the old Apocalypse that was substantial.
Yeah.
We'd have points awarded by commanders to specific factions because you'd have a war council and there would be a supreme commander, but then everybody would role play their commander in the war council.
Right.
And then the supreme commander would be responsible for giving out basically rerolls. And they were based on role playing within that war council for how things were going, but at the same time trying to succeed at your individual mission objectives. So you had objectives, and but it was a role playing session, and it was, some people bristled with like, I didn't ever get a reroll. I was like, well, you didn't role play, man. Like, I'm sorry you weren't into that, but it's not like we took anything away. You just didn't get the bonus,
right.
But the guy that was like, the brave Rastroyans are here to defend, and we will die in your honor, and it's like, well, good luck with that. Here's some rerolls, buddy.
I've read a lot of Black Library books where it's
it's
councils of guys talking, and I'm like, okay.
And there are things, I mean, things like Fate and other things where you can award points to that kind of, oh, that was really cool. Well, we attacked this left flank because that guy, he made an obscene gesture, and so we destroyed that unit. It was really stupid for the scenario, but I love it. So here's a reroll.
Right.
Here's a point.
Yeah. I mean, I love all this stuff. And I love, like, if you could even decorate your room area. Now, this is going pretty far because not a lot of people have dedicated room, but if you could decorate your room in some way, the mini wargaming guys with their new facility have themed rooms.
Right.
Here's the orc room. Here's the,
Well, like the Cthulhu game you were talking about, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is exactly like if you could do that, and you can do it fairly easily. Like banners go a long way if you're able to buy or make some banners that like hang down and represent, each of the factions that are playing.
Butcher paper and a pen.
Oh, sure.
Just a couple triangles and circles.
That's right. Super easy, right?
Ever heard of an airbrush?
I mean, if you could make, for anything, if you're going real far, like any kind of, my uncle, and a couple of my uncles and one of my aunts and Shell would sometimes for Halloween build haunted houses. And these were like huge productions, and there was a play and everything that they would do out in front of my uncle's house every year, and it would draw all these crowds of people and stuff. And I mean, they would build these sets that were incredible. I mean, if you had the capability to know how to build things that kind of added to it, that would be amazing. So if you could design like an interior, I love when I go to Warhammer World and I look and you feel like you're inside a castle in some ways. Yeah. I mean, that kind of thing is really, really phenomenal. So if you were doing an event at a big area where you had the room and you had the know-how, you could prepare for that. Like you could create the way the walls look and then go set them up in advance.
Sheets of black, and my environmental self conscious self is not just should be a very rare thing you do. But sheets of black anti-weed netting, or sheets of plastic.
Yeah.
It's super cheap, and you can cover a ton of area with them. We had a Halloween party where we lined the entire kitchen with this black sheets hanging down the walls, and then turned the lights down so they were a little flickery, which for a 40K game admittedly would cause some problems. But then we spray painted like glyphs, and it was a very vampire-y themed party. Right. And at night I went into the kitchen where we were going to have like a big part of the party going on the next day. I went into the kitchen to get a drink of water, and I was like, this is legitimately too creepy to be in at night by myself. Like, I'm freaking myself out, and I built it. But I mean, simple stuff like that about putting down, black plastic on the floor to, that's the star field, or, I mean, I mean, there's a part of this that, extreme. But if you were doing a culmination event, why not? I mean, go for it. A little dry ice goes a long way.
Oh yeah. Well, and there's
in this room I could black out each of the windows from outside with Starfield. You feel like you're in the Geller field.
Yeah. Or put special psychedelic colors or make a picture
You're
of
in
the
the warp.
demon like
there you go.
Hands on the
Do
window.
one big white stripe for the Astronomicon.
There you go.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And I think that exactly. I mean, we're talking about extreme narrative gaming, right? And so these kinds of things for culmination events are fantastic.
Yeah.
3D printed props.
Absolutely.
The las guns and
I'm trying to figure out how to print a bolter. Like, I found a thing and I'm running into problems printing it. Like,
I mean,
I really want a bolter.
Even simple things like if you have the most points, you're wearing a particular hat, right? Or things that signify you as the target force, right? Oh, that's the guy with the hoodie.
Yeah.
Everybody attack that guy,
One of the last things kind of before the Reading branch of G3 stopped running events and that was the original one. One of the last things Anthony was working on was creating artifacts that would be handed out after certain games. And if you had the artifact, you got certain benefits, and then you had to bring them back to the next game,
right?
Cool. And I mean, Anthony always had a real flair for those kind of props and
things
gifts.
And,
but I mean, there were little daggers and now with 3D printing, I mean, that's
props
easier
like
than
that
ever.
3D
awesome.
printing or the Spencer store at the mall, or even the Spirit store during Halloween. You could go in there and get a whole bunch of things.
Skulls.
You could use different things as artifacts and things. And exactly that. I mean, you have the artifacts, the relics in your codex, right? You can have things that represent those, and whether you earn it or not.
make servo skulls and hang them from the ceiling.
That would wouldn't be that hard.
That would be pretty easy to do.
Awesome.
I might need to consider that.
You got these pull cords. You're 90% of the way there.
Or get those little drones and put a skull on the drone and have it fly around. A controlled drone.
So next level, extreme, you have servo skulls on a drone, and then you have a projector screen that it's feeding to, giving live flyby footage over the table.
Oh, there you go. See, and here's the thing.
And then the commander in the other room is watching that feed.
And he
trying
has
to
to make
decide what to
decisions
do.
based on that.
And so here's the thing. The thing that we're just doing right here
Until somebody loses an eye.
is how you do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You sit down and you brainstorm, and you go to the front and goes, okay, now that's a little too extreme. I'm sorry, we're not cutting off.
We're not
finger
able
if
to
they
go
mess
that
with
far.
it. Right? But
What if it's their pinky?
But it sparks.
Do you need it?
Offhand? But it sparks a lot of discussion.
Sure.
And you say, oh, you know what? That's a really good idea. I didn't think of that. Oh, how would we modify that? Oh, you could do this. Oh, yeah. And then on a 5, it would do that. Oh, that would be perfect. And that's kind of how you build it. And man, you come up with some such great scenarios that way, and
it just makes
fun.
it so much richer.
Yeah,
It's
right.
so
Absolutely.
much richer.
Absolutely.
I think that's a great way to sum it up right there. Yeah. I think you did a great job summarizing everything right there, Adon. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a break. We're going to come back, and we'll close out the show. So thank you for joining us for episode 202 of the Independent Characters. Yeah, it was a great episode.
Yeah,
That was a lot of fun to talk about, actually. As you know, we have a Patreon, which you can join. We love reading reviews on iTunes. Please continue to leave us reviews on iTunes. We have a fantastic Facebook group, which Loopy and Adon are heroically moderating. Boy, I'll tell you, once we started saying, if they haven't answered any questions, just to auto decline, that made life a whole lot
so
easier.
answer the questions if you really want to get in the group, even if you have friends in the group.
Yeah.
And something about the iTunes.
We see a lot of spammers trying to join the group.
Yeah, we do. Thing about the iTunes, there are other podcast platforms, and some of them also have rating systems.
Yep.
So feel free to use those as well if you're using some other way to get your podcast.
Yep.
We'd love to see a review on that as well.
Yep. iTunes continues, however, to be the big dog.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
in the corner.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
leave us reviews wherever you can.
Facebook has a place for reviews. Okay?
If you got ideas there, or you think we haven't covered something correctly, or you have a criticism, we're always open to criticism. But unfortunately, I can't reply to reviews in most cases. So feel free to email me at carl@theindependentcharacters.com, and we can take a look at what your suggestions or thoughts are there.
Or message us on Facebook.
Or if you're on the Patreon,
please.
you can just reach out to me on Discord.
There you go.
Because if you're of certain levels of Patreon patronage, that's the word, you can join us on our Discord channel, which we like to call, if the Facebook group is the club, the Discord channel is the champagne room at the back of the club. So, So you guys got anything you want to add before we go? You want to talk about each of your projects there?
Each of my projects.
Well, you got one and you have one.
No. So I do. There is one thing though I wanted to talk about is that, and I didn't know where to fit this in or bring it up, but saying you're wanting to try this out, where do you start? And the easiest way I know where to start to try out a narrative game is sit down with your buddy, take one of the Force Orgs, and then try and design a mission around that one style of Force Org chart. It's an Outrider. It's a Spearhead. Okay, what's it doing? Those Force Org charts are a great way to just start this conversation.
Yeah.
Sit down, go, I'm taking 3 fast attacks and an HQ, and play a small game. Take not a battalion, take one of the other ones, play a small game, 500, 1,000 points at the absolute maximum.
Absolute max, yeah.
Absolute maximum, 750, 500 points. Try and fit in a Force Org, and then play a game which makes sense of why you took that Force Org. It's the easiest spot I can suggest you start trying this out and see what you think.
Yeah.
The other thing is there's a ton of content out there on the web for people who've done narrative stuff, and also on the Facebook page in the files section. Some folks have posted some really cool stuff there.
For sure.
And you can use those for ideas or use them as is to do that as well.
Well, okay. You guys got anything else you want to add before we kind of sign off then?
Nope.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and do it. So this is Carl.
This is Adon.
This is Jody.
And we're coming to you from the Astronomicon, where only your imagination is the limit to your fun.
You can make the game what you've always wanted it to be.
And where the story lives in all of us.
This episode of The Independent Characters is protected by the Creative Commons license. If you have further questions as to its use, you can find information on the front page at theindependentcharacters.com.